Good morning, everybody. The time is 10 o'clock, and I call the July 6, 2023 Planning Board meeting to order. We are joined by Vice Chair Bailey.
Morning.
Commissioner Washington.
Good morning.
Commissioner Giraldo. And I am Chair Shapiro, and we move forward to our business at hand. Please note that the deadline for all participant pre-registration for all submission of materials and exhibits was 12 noon on the Tuesday before this planning board meeting. Registered speakers may join the meeting with the link provided in the email provided by the planning board office or listen by phone by utilizing the call-in number provided in the email. Of course, anyone may tune in to watch the planning board meeting via live stream. If you wish to speak or become a person of record, you may use our online web form, which you'll see referenced on the screen. In addition to the commissioners, we're joined by our principal counsel, David Warner, Jessica Jones, our planning board administrator, Joe Parsons, our senior technical hearing writer, James Hunt, division chief for the Development Review Division. And we have staff members, Kenneth Flanagan and Dan Hartman, who are going to be helping us with technology behind the scenes. We will follow, commissioners will follow the order of cases as advertised, and we'll begin with item 2. I would look for a motion to approve the draft minutes of June 29, 2023.
Motion to approve draft minutes.
Second.
Got a motion by Vice Chair Bailey, a second by Commissioner Washington. Discussion. I'll call the roll. Vice Chair Bailey.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Washington.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo.
I vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 4-0. Next, we have one consent agenda item 4D. Is there anyone who wishes to oppose staff's recommendations on item 4D? Any board member wishes to discuss the item? If not, I'd look for a motion to approve.
Motion to approve item on the consent agenda in accordance with the recommendation of staff. 4D.
Second.
Got a motion by Vice Chair Bailey, second by Commissioner Washington. Discussion on the motion. Seeing no discussion, I'll call the roll. Vice Chair Bailey.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Washington.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo.
I vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 4-0. Moving on to our regular agenda items. We'll begin with item 5. This is a detailed site plan. DSP 91071-03 Highland Park Senior Housing, First Baptist Church. We have Dan Lynch, who is representing the applicant. And we have Emery Wong, who's will be giving the staff presentation. This is an evidentiary hearing. I don't know if we have folks who are going to be signed up to speak. We'll make a determination on whether we're going to swear folks in based on what the representative for the applicant says. So let's start with a brief staff presentation. Mr. Wong, take it away. Emery, do we have you on? Mr. Hunt? I don't hear you, Mr. Hunt. And take your time, folks.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Yeah.
Oh, it looks like we're having some technical difficulties. I'm going to run back here and check on him real quick. If it please you and the board, you can move on to the next item, and then we'll come right back.
That's fine. So we're gonna put a pause on this item, and let's move on to item 6. Item 6 is a detailed site plan, DSP 22034 Alto Woodmore. We have Mr. Gibbs, Ed Gibbs, who's representing the applicant. We have Andrew Shelley, who's going to be giving the staff presentation. This also is an evidentiary hearing. I do believe we have folks signed up to speak on this. So I'm going to ask everybody who wishes to speak to come online on camera if you can, because I'll be swearing you in. I'm going to ask all people intending to provide testimony to raise their right hand. And this is for folks in support, opposition, staff. Folks part of the applicant's team. Good, thank you. Do you all solemnly swear or affirm that your testimony will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do. I do.
Yes. I do.
I do.
Okay, thank you. I'll consider yourself sworn in. So we will now start with the staff presentation. I will turn to Mr. Shelley. Take it away, Mr. Shelley. The floor is yours. Mr. Shelley, do we have you online? Boy, are we having technical difficulties, folks.
Mr. Chair, I think Mr. Wang is back on now. Sorry. There we go. And I'll check on Mr. Shelley in the meantime.
I would prefer that we go back to the first case because I think the second case may take a little bit longer. Pardon for the confusion, folks, but we are still open and live on item 6, but we're going to go back to item 5. So on item 5, we have the staff presentation. Mr. Wang, take it away.
Chair, I believe you can hear my voice, right? Sorry for the technical issues.
We can hear your voice. It's soft and it's very echoey.
How about now?
Better.
A little better.
Okay.
Much better. Well, a little better. I agree with Vice Chair Bailey.
Okay, so I'm going to start my presentation. Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the Planning Board. For the record, I am Emery Huang with the Urban Design sections. Item number 5, which is showing on your screen, is a detailed site plan DSP-91071-03 for Highland Park Senior Housing, which propose the development of an apartment building with 137 dwelling units for the elderly. The applicant has proposed a revision to the finding 6 and to condition 1 and 3 in the memorandum titled Applicant Exhibit 1 prior to the noon deadline on July 4th, 2023. Staff have reviewed the revised finding and conditions and is in agreement with them. Staff would also like to note that on May 19, 2023, an inquiry was received from a resident regarding the subject development. After clarifying the exact location for this development, these residents did not have additional questions and comments regarding these applications. Based on the findings presented in the technical staff report, Urban Design staff recommended that Planning Board approve the detailed site plan DSP-91071-03 and the Type 2 Tree Conservation Plan TCP2-016-2023, subject to the recommended conditions of approval within the technical staff report as revised by the conditions provided by the applicant and the revision to finding 6 in applicant's Exhibit 1. This concludes staff presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wang. Commissioners, any questions for staff before we hear from the applicant? No questions. Mr. Lynch, turn to you. Good morning. The floor is yours.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the board. For the record, Dan Lynch with the law firm of McNamee Hosey here on behalf of Community Housing Initiative. As Mr. Wang mentioned, we're here with regard to 137-unit elderly housing building that's going to be located on the property that's currently occupied by First Baptist Church of Highland Park. I have with me here today a representative of the applicant, Robert Byrne, who's here to address any questions that I am unable to address. We agree with the staff recommendation, but did submit last week revised findings and conditions. We ran those past staff, and staff's in complete agreement with what we're proposing. I would merely point out to you, if you do have a copy, they're asking for the finding on page 9 to be deleted, and that's the reference to adding an additional door to the building. And then we're also asking that condition 1G and 3B be deleted. And again, those conditions also have to do with the additional door located on the back of the building. And with that, as indicated, we're in complete agreement with staff. We'd like to thank Mr. Wang for his cooperation and assistance moving this through the process. And I am available for any questions you have, as well as my client, Robert Byrne. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lynch. Commissioners, any questions for staff? I mean, for the applicant, rather, I apologize. No questions, so there's no one who signed up to speak on this. The applicant has proposed revised conditions, but the applicant and staff are in full agreement.
Before we get a motion, I really would like to take an opportunity to thank the staff for responding to the inquiry so promptly. Quite often, we don't acknowledge what the work that the staff is doing before the individuals come before us, but sometimes they respond in such a positive way and an effective way that citizens don't have to take the time to come before us. So I want to compliment the staff on how they handle this particular inquiry.
Thank you. Well said, Vice Chair Bailey. Thank you. All right. If there's nothing else before us, I will close the public hearing on this, such as it is. And I would, if there's no deliberation, I'd look for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, associating myself with Madam Vice Chair's comments, I move that we adopt the findings of staff and the modified finding as outlined in applicant exhibit number 1 and approve DSP-91071-03 and TCP2-016-2023, along with the conditions as outlined in staff's report and as further modified by applicant exhibit number 1.
Second.
Got a motion by Commissioner Washington, second by Vice Chair Bailey. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing no discussion, I'll call the roll. Commissioner Washington.
Vote aye.
Vice Chair Bailey.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo.
I vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 4-0. Thank you, Mr. Huang. Thank you, Mr. Lynch. And
Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Well,
Thank you.
You as well.
Commissioners, folks, I apologize, but we need to take a 5-minute break. So we're going to, and then we'll pick back up item 6 on the agenda. So it's 10:12. We will start back up at 10:17. On 5, we are in process on item 6, which we will pick back up. Mr. Shelley. Do we have you? We can hear you?
Yes, good morning, Mr. Chair. Are you able to hear me okay?
We can hear you fine. So again, for the public, just a reminder, Mr. Shelley, before you go, this is an evidentiary hearing. So I've already sworn in those who have testimony. We'll start with staff presentation, then we'll hear from the applicant and any members of his team. We will then turn to the public, see who would like to speak. We'll give the applicant, at any point, commissioners can ask questions, of course. We'll then give the applicant the final word, and then we will close the hearing and we will deliberate accordingly. And with all that, I will now turn to Mr. Shelley. Take it away for the staff presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. For the record, my name is Andrew Shelley with the Urban Design Section. The item before you is item number 6, detailed site plan DSP-22034 for Alta Woodmore, which seeks to develop 284 multifamily dwelling units in 2 5-story buildings. As part of the application, the applicant has requested a departure from design standards for reduction in the parking space size and an alternative compliance from the requirements of Section 4.3 of the 2010 Prince George's County Landscape Manual. As a matter of housekeeping, the applicant has provided a revised conditions memorandum titled Applicant Exhibit 1 prior to the hearing deadline on July 4, 2023. The revised conditions are agreed upon by staff and the applicant. Conditions regarding loading spaces, architecture, and dog park fencing have been modified and will be discussed within the presentation. Staff would also like to clarify 2 items. The first is that the total number of bicycle parking spaces on pages 16 and 19 of the staff report should be updated from 115 bicycle parking spaces to 121 bicycle parking spaces. The second is that a referral from the City of Glenarden was not received. However, staff learned after the hearing deadline on July 4th that the referral was not sent to the current city representative and instead was sent to former representatives. Next slide, please. The site shown in red is located in Planning Area 73 and Council District 5. Next slide, please. Subject property shown in red is located on the west side of Ruby Lockhart Boulevard, approximately 312 feet north of its intersection with St. Joseph's Drive. Next slide, please. The subject property shown in red consists of 20.28 acres and is within the Town Activity Center Edge, or TACE, zone, but is being reviewed under the prior mixed-use transportation-oriented, or MXT, zone of the prior zoning ordinance. The subject property is bounded to the north by open space and the existing Woodmore Town Center in the TACE zone, to the south by a place of worship known as St. Joseph's Catholic Church in the Rural Residential, or RR zone, to the east by Ruby Lockhart Boulevard and commercial residential uses beyond in the TACE and residential multifamily -48, or RMF 48 zone, and to the west by MD 202 and the I-95/495 northbound ramp. Next slide, please. This slide with the subject property shown in red demonstrates the existing conditions of the site. The site currently is labeled as Outlot A. The site is partially wooded and has an existing freestanding pylon sign that was previously approved via DSP-07011-01. This sign provides advertising panels for various uses within the Woodmore Town Center and will be maintained with this development. In mixed-use zones, design standards for signage are approved by the planning board, and approval of signage associated with this proposed development is not hindered by this existing sign. Next slide, please. This map with the site shown in purple demonstrates the location's environmental features. This property is subject to the provisions of the 1991 Prince George's County Woodland Conservation and Tree Preservation Ordinance, a Type 2 Tree Conservation Plan, TCP 2-053-07-06, was submitted with this DSP application. In accordance with the approved natural resource inventory, NRI-021-0606, 13 specimen trees have been identified on the subject property, along with 100-year floodplain, wetlands, streams, and steep slopes that comprise the primary management area, or PMA. The TCP2 and DSP show all required information correctly in conformance with the NRI. The applicant does not propose any PMA impacts or the removal of any specimen trees with this development application. Next slide, please. This map shows the adjacent master plan rights-of-way. The site, shown in blue, has frontage on Ruby Lockhart Boulevard, a major collector to the east, and MD 202, an expressway to the west. The site will be accessed via an existing single point on Ruby Lockhart Boulevard. Staff does not anticipate that the State Highway Association, or SHA, would grant access to the subject property via MD 202. Traffic adequacy was determined during the previously approved preliminary plan of subdivision 4-06016. Next slide, please. This detailed site plan demonstrates the proposed site layout of the property, with 284 multifamily dwelling units located in 2 5-story buildings. The buildings are labeled Building 1 and Building 2. Building 1 is closest to MD 202, while Building 2 is closest to Ruby Lockhart Boulevard. The site will contain one lot to be known as Lot 28 and one outlot to be known as Proposed Outlot E. Outlot E has frontage along Ruby Lockhart Boulevard and proposes future commercial development, which will be evaluated in a separate DSP. The property will be accessed via a single existing access point on Ruby Lockhart Boulevard, providing a driveway to the multifamily residential buildings. As part of this development proposal, the existing place of worship to the south will obtain a secondary access point. The site provides a total of 493 on-site parking spaces, of which 35 are garage rental spaces and 18 are Americans with Disability Act or ADA spaces. The 35 garage spaces are spread throughout the site and are located in 4 blocks. 121 bicycle parking spaces are provided, which includes a mixture of external and internal spaces. 1 loading space is required by the zoning ordinance, but 2 internal loading spaces have been provided. However, neither meets the minimum dimensional requirements specified by the zoning ordinance. The applicant has proposed a revision to condition 1H to provide increased flexibility to meet the zoning ordinance requirement. This revision specifies that the applicant must provide at least 1 loading space that meets the minimum dimensional requirements of the zoning ordinance. This may be accomplished through a revision to an internal parking space or by providing an external on-site loading space. On-site recreational facilities are provided, which include a playground, pool, fitness center, and 2 courtyards and 2 residential lounges, a dog park, dog waste stations, and a pet grooming spa while not recreation facilities, are included as unique amenities for the site. The detailed site plan provides the necessary plantings and schedules in conformance with the 2010 Prince George's County Landscape Manual, with the exception of section 4.3, which we discuss later in this presentation. Staff finds the applicant's site layout and landscaping to be acceptable, subject to the technical corrections as listed on pages 48 through 50 of the technical staff report. An analysis of staff's findings is stated on pages 7 through 44 of the technical staff report. Next slide, please. This slide provides a 3D model for the site demonstrating multiple views and angles of the site. Two particular important views to staff were that from Ruby Lockhart Boulevard and MD 202. Staff notes that a majority of the existing vegetation that is being preserved along MD 202 on site is not shown in the model. This vegetation plus planted landscaping behind the garages furthest to the west of the site will provide adequate screening from MD 202. As you can see on the screen, this is a model that was created by our GIS team to give the planning board a representation of what the site will look like in a 3D space.
That's a nice tool.
Yeah, very nice.
And with that, let's move on to the next slide, please. This slide demonstrates the provided site construction details. One important site detail to mention is the retaining wall. There are multiple retaining walls on site, but the retaining wall furthest to the south will be utilized as an additional buffer from the existing place of worship. The wall will be a maximum of 13 feet high and include a 6-foot board-on-board wooden fence. Next slide, please. The applicant requests alternative compliance from the requirements of section 4.3-2 of the landscape manual. Per section 4.3-2, an applicant shall provide 1 shade tree per 300 square feet of interior landscape area provided. The applicant has proposed 34,288 square feet of landscape area of interior landscape area, which requires a total of 115 shade trees. Due to the unusual shape of the property, primary and management area of the site, stormwater management facilities, and parking needed to support the 284 dwelling units, the space for trees within the interior of the lot is limited. As a result, the applicant proposes only 49 shade trees within the interior of the parking lot. Next slide, please. To mitigate the lack of interior shade trees, the applicant has proposed 16% landscape area instead of the required 15%, which increases the amount by 2,432 square feet. In addition, the applicant proposes an additional 70 shade trees along the perimeter parking lot, which are shown in pink. However, this does not adequately address the lack of interior shade trees, as there is additional space that has not been utilized internally to the parking lot. Therefore, the planning director recommends that at least 9 additional shade trees be provided to reach half of the requirement internally, bringing the total to 58 shade trees. In addition, the planning director recommends that all internal shade trees be planted at a minimum of 3 to 3.5 inch caliber to provide more immediate shade and visual relief. These revisions should be provided prior to the signature approval of the DSP. With these revisions, the planning director believes that the proposed alternative design will be equally effective as normal compliance with section 4.3-2 of the landscape manual due to the increased landscape area, increased tree size, and perimeter shade trees. Next slide, please. This slide demonstrates the areas of the project where landscape plantings will be located. Staff note that the provided fence for the section 4.6-1 buffer is inadequate. The fence runs parallel to the place of worship's property line to the south, but does not screen the property boundary that faces MD 202. Therefore, a condition has been provided for the applicant to revise the section 4.6-1 schedule to provide the necessary plant material to conform with section 4.6 of the landscape manual. Emphasis shall be placed on providing the plant material behind the garages fronting MD 202 to enhance their screening from the roadway. An analysis of staff's findings regarding the landscape plan is provided on pages 42 through 44 of the technical staff report. Technical corrections for the landscape plan are provided on pages 49 and 50 of the technical staff report. Next slide, please. This slide demonstrates the proposed playground and dog park facilities. The playground will be located in the northern portion of the site, while the dog park will be located in the eastern portion of the site, adjacent to the proposed commercial development on proposed Outlot E. Condition Condition 1N has been revised by the applicant to state that a 6-foot-high site-type fence will be provided along the eastern perimeter boundary of the dog park where it abuts Outlot E to separate the dog park from the proposed commercial/retail use. Next slide, please. The following 2 slides represent the recreation facility site details for the subject application. Some important features included are fire pits, cabanas, and numerous benches. Staff note that while not a recreation facility, the applicant is providing dogway stations and a dog fountain within the provided dog park and a pet grooming spa within the multifamily buildings. Next slide, please.
I can't do nothing.
The playground will have various types of equipment as noted, which includes ADA equipment. An analysis of the site's recreation facilities is provided on pages 9 and 10 of the technical staff report. A condition has been provided that requires the applicant to provide a detailed cost estimate of the values of the planned recreation facilities. Next slide, please. The following slide represents one of 4 truck turning exhibits submitted with this application. Staff found that the site circulation was adequate and was sufficient for large vehicles, subject to revised condition 1H, requiring the applicant to provide at least 1 voting space that meets the dimensional requirements. A discussion on the site circulation is included within the findings, demonstrating conformance to the previously approved preliminary plan of subdivision 4-06016 on pages 37 through 40 of the technical staff report. As part of the application, the applicant requests a departure from design standards for the standard parking space size, which requires non-parallel standard parking spaces to be 9.5 feet by 19 feet, but allows up to 1/3 of the required spaces to be compact, measuring 8 feet by 16.5 feet. The applicant is providing 458 parking spaces on the site, measuring 9 feet by 18 feet, except for the required spaces for the physically handicapped. The 35 garage rental parking spaces are also not included in this request. No compact parking spaces are proposed within this DSP. Based on analysis provided on pages 25 through 28 of the technical staff report, staff recommends the planning board approve the departure from design standards to reduce the dimensions of the proposed standard parking spaces from 9.5 feet by 19 feet to 9.5 feet by 18 feet. Next slide, please. These next slides will discuss the architecture of the 2 proposed buildings. These 2 buildings are 5 stories each, are U-shaped, and are designed in a contemporary architectural style. The buildings have flat roofs, a mixture of windows, including storefront windows on the first floor, and balconies with railings, and are constructed of brick and fiber cement in a variety of colors. These include white, different shades of gray, and an accent blue. Each building has a defining corner element along the main internal driveway with a raised cornice and top floor units with transom windows. This corner also includes building mounted signage displaying the name of the development, which is Alta Woodmore. The front of building 1 is shown on the left and the front of building 2 is shown on the right. As noted earlier, building 1 will be located furthest to the west of the site near MD 202, and building 2 will be located furthest to the east of the site near Ruby Lockhart Boulevard. Next slide, please. This slide illustrates the rear and side elevation of building 1. The rear elevation is shown on the bottom and the side elevation is shown on the top. As the rear elevation faces MD 202, it is required to be in conformance with condition 20 of the conceptual site plan CSP-03006-02, which requires that at least 60% of the facade consist of brick material. The applicant has provided an exhibit, applicant exhibit 1, demonstrating the area that will include brick material in at least 60% of the facade, and staff is in agreement. Next slide, please. This slide illustrates the front and side elevations of building 1, with the front elevation shown on the top and the side elevation shown on the bottom. This front elevation has a defining corner element with the building mounted signage with a raised cornice and top floor units or transom windows. Condition 1L-1 has been revised by the applicant and agreed upon by staff. This revision requires the applicant to provide full brick for the first floor of each building elevation, with the exception of courtyards and recessed balcony areas. Next slide, please. This slide demonstrates the proposed architectural elevations surrounding the courtyard and pool associated with building 1. The applicant has considered providing residents with views of the courtyard through various balconies that enhance the architecture and quality of the project. Next slide, please. The following 3 slides illustrate the elevations for building 2, which is closest to Ruby Lockhart Boulevard. The architecture is consistent and compatible with Building 1. This slide in particular shows the rear and side elevations of the building, where the rear is shown on the top and the side is shown on the bottom. Next slide, please. This slide illustrates the front and side elevations of Building 2. The front elevation is shown on the top and the side elevation is shown on the bottom. As the front elevation faces Ruby Lockhart Boulevard, it is required to be in conformance with Condition 20 of the Conceptual Site Plan CSP-03006-02, which requires that at least 60% of the facade consist of brick material. The applicant has provided an exhibit, Applicant Exhibit 1, demonstrating the area that will include brick material in at least 60% of the facade, and staff is in agreement. Next slide, please. This slide demonstrates the proposed architectural elevation surrounding the courtyard associated with Building 2. The applicant has considered providing residents with views of the courtyard through various balconies that enhance the architecture and quality of the project. Overall, staff find the proposed architecture sufficient, subject to conditions listed on page 49 of the technical staff report and further modified by Applicant Exhibit 1. Next slide, please. The following two slides demonstrate the proposed architectural elevations for the 35 garage units. This slide demonstrates the architecture for garage blocks 1 and 2, which are consistent and compatible with the contemporary architecture for the two multifamily buildings. Next slide, please. Staff has provided a condition regarding the proposed architecture for garage blocks 3 and 4. Staff finds that while the architecture of these garage blocks is consistent with the multifamily buildings, they are not compatible with the existing freestanding pylon sign. This sign is shown between the two blocks as a kind of gray rectangle. Therefore, staff has provided two conditions to enhance the architecture. The first requires the applicant to incorporate additional white coloring into the garages in lieu of the blue to match the existing signage. The second condition then requires the applicant to offer a brick feature on top of garages blocks 3 and 4 to incorporate the existing signage into the design. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. This slide illustrates the location and architectural elevations of the maintenance shed, which has been designed to be architecturally similar to the multifamily buildings. Staff finds the architecture of the maintenance shed acceptable, subject to a condition revising the location map of the maintenance shed to conform with the DSP. Next slide, please. The following two slides demonstrate the proposed signage for the application. The subject site will feature 2 building-mounted signs, 2 address signs, and 1 freestanding sign. Building-mounted and address signs are provided on each multifamily residential building. Both address signs are 12 square feet, whilst the building-mounted sign on Building 1 is 76 square feet, and the signage on Building 2 is 82.3 square feet. Next slide, please. The freestanding sign is proposed to be 6 feet high by 13 feet wide on a stone stand fronting Ruby Lockhart Boulevard. The total sign area is 124.4 square feet and illustrates the name of the residential property, Alta Woodmore, which is illuminated. Staff find the proposed signage acceptable, subject to conditions, and analysis of the signage is included on page 10 of the technical staff report. These conditions include providing a signage schedule in the DSP cover sheet, revising the freestanding sign stand material to brick to be consistent with the material of multifamily buildings, and to provide attractive understory landscape surrounding the proposed freestanding signage along Ruby Lockhart Boulevard. Next slide, please. The following slide demonstrates the tree conservation plan, which is recommended for approval subject to condition 2 of the technical staff report. An analysis of staff's findings on the TCP2 can be found on pages 44 and 45 of the technical staff report. Next slide, please. Staff notes that an opposition exhibit 1, was received prior to the hearing deadline on July 4, 2023. The opposition herein is concerned with the intensity of the use and the traffic impacts that this development will have on the community. Staff notes multifamily residential dwelling units are a permitted use within the TACE zone and that the use meets all requirements associated with the TACE zone. The number of dwelling units proposed is consistent with the previously approved conceptual site plan CSP-03006-02. The proposed traffic impacts have been analyzed with the previously approved preliminary plan of subdivision 4-06016 and are consistent. The urban design section recommends that the planning board adopt the findings of this report and approve detailed site plan DSP-22034, alternative compliance AC-23001, departure from design standards DDS-22002, and type 2 tree conservation plan TCP2-053-07-06, subject to the recommended conditions of approval within the technical staff report and the revised conditions provided by the applicant and agreed upon by staff and applicant Exhibit 1. This would conclude staff's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shelley. Commissioners, questions for staff?
I have a question. I'm happy to see the applicant with the dog park and providing water. I think we're seeing that more and more, so I appreciate that. I didn't, and I may have overlooked it, and if I did, I apologize, Mr. Shelley. What's the provision in the parking or in the buildings for the residents for EV charging?
I do not believe, I will allow the applicant to speak further on this, but at this location, I do not believe the applicant proposed EV charging stations.
Yeah, I asked because I read an article recently in terms of the amount, what's expected within the next 5 to 7 years in terms of the volume of electrical vehicles and the lack of adequate charging stations. But I'll ask the applicant. Thank you. No further questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other questions for staff? Just a quick one from me, and pardon me if this is more of a preliminary plan or a CSP stage thing, but I'm curious around both the bike ped access for the site, especially connected to the retail development next to it, and also, and so were there any discussions that you had, Mr. Shelley, around that? And also, am I understanding that this is a right in, right out only? Or can folks come out of this and take a left into the retail development?
For the record, again, Mr. Chair, this is Andrew Shelley with the Urban Design Section. It is right in, right out only due to there being a median on Ruby Lockhart Boulevard, and that would be a DPI issue in terms of getting DPI, and also county issue in terms of getting a acceptance to cross that median or to remove the median in that location, which is not anticipated. So it would be right in, right out. And the bicycle pathways that are on Ruby Lockhart Boulevard would have been evaluated with the preliminary plan of subdivision, not with this application.
Okay. Okay. I suspect, and I'll bring it up with the applicant too. Thank you, Mr. Shelley. Any other questions for staff before we turn to the applicant? Okay. Mr. Gibbs, turn over to you, and you may or may not want to introduce members of your team, but anyhow, the floor is yours.
Okay, yes, good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Board. Edward Gibbs, an attorney with offices in Largo, with the firm of Gibbs and Haller, and very pleased to be here today representing the applicant in this detailed site plan and departure from design standards case. We do have our entire client and consultant development team on board with us today. We have, and let me just say this, that the applicant per se is WS Woodmore LLC. That is an entity formed by and controlled by Wood Partners, which is headquartered in Atlanta, but which is a national real estate development and construction firm. And they have 3 of their folks on with us today. Mr. Scott Zimmerly, who is responsible for the entire Mid-Atlantic Development Division of Wood Partners and their multifamily components. And Mr. Jason Burrell, who is responsible for all of the issues associated with development of the plan. And then Mr. Zachary Albert, who works directly with Mr. Zimmerly here locally. In addition, we have 2 different traffic consultants who have participated in analyzing all aspects related to traffic associated with this project, including right in, right out, Mr. Chairman. And we certainly can answer any questions that you have about that at the appropriate time. And so those two individuals would be Michael Lenhart of Lenhart Traffic Consulting and Maribel Wong of Grove Slade. We have a landscape architect, Mr. Jesse Van Wyck. We have representatives from the architectural firm of J. Davis, Matt Ansley, and Shannon Babsky. And I think that, oh, and we also have representatives from our civil engineering firm, of course, Bowler. Mira Gansert is with us this morning as well. If I have missed anybody, I'm sure they'll let me know via text and I'll introduce them as well. Let me say that I understand there is some opposition which has registered in this case. And so not wanting to try to anticipate what their precise issues are going to be, I am going to orient my initial presentation to responding to the staff preparation, staff report presentation today, and giving you some information about the project and the history. I've had the good fortune to represent all owners in the development team of Woodmore Town Center. I started working on this project in 2003 or 2004 when really the Rouse Company, who was a client of mine, had entered into a contract to sell the property to K. Hovnanian Enterprises. And I have handled every entitlement application that has been processed for this project since that time, including revising conditions that were associated and attached to the original rezoning when McCormick Properties owned this land in 1988, as well as all of the requirements for entitlements under the MXT zone, including the conceptual site plan, the preliminary subdivision plan, various detailed site plans, and final plats of subdivision. I want to say a few words about Wood Partners. Like I said, they are a national real estate development and construction firm, but they have a very long history of development in Prince George's County. They had 3 projects which they started with down abutting and inside of the Branch Avenue Metro Station. The first project was Tribeca, which they ended up selling many years ago. Chelsea East and Chelsea West within the Branch Avenue Metro Station. A project called Evolution, which was part of the Laurel Mall redevelopment into the Laurel Town Center. And then Alloy by Alta, which is a large multifamily building on Route 1 in the heart of College Park. More recently, you planning board members may recall that within the last year, you also approved a detailed site plan for Wood Partners called Alta New Carrollton, which is a multifamily building immediately abutting the rail tracks at the New Carrollton Metro Station. My client has just recently settled on that transaction and is now the owner of that property and is proceeding immediately with construction permitting plans. So that's the history. They're very familiar with Prince George's County and the product that they have delivered within the county has always been of the highest quality, and they have always exhibited highest attention to detail and commitment to following through on what they say. I have had the pleasure of representing them on every entitlement application they have filed in Prince George's County, all of which I have just advised you about. We would agree, and let me just say, I would congratulate Mr. Shelley for the thoroughness of his entire preparation. He has asked us many questions along the way. He has been fair and transparent, and the report that he produced is quite frankly outstanding. To get as deep into the entitlement history of this project as he did is certainly noteworthy. So a couple things I want to say. Number one, this 284 multifamily product has been envisioned to be part of Woodmore Town Center since the approval of the original conceptual site plan, which occurred in 2005. In October of 2005, the Planning Board approved CSP 03006, and the District Council reviewed and approved that plan in January of 2006. And that original conceptual site plan approved 900 to 1,100 residential units of all types, including multifamily units, single-family detached townhomes, 2-over-2 condos, and other similar residential products. It approved up to 1 million square feet of commercial retail space. It approved up to 1 million square feet of office space. It approved 360 hotel rooms and a conference center with a maximum square footage of 45,000 square feet. Of course, as you know, the Woodmore Town Center, I would like to perhaps selfishly say, is probably the most successful example of a mixed-use commercial concentrated development in Prince George's County. And the success of Wegmans has, certainly drawn everyone's attention. They continue to be an all-star performer at the in the retail venue market in Prince George's County. And of course, there are many other support retail units. Woodmore Town Center has recently been sold. The original developer of Woodmore Town Center was a combination of K. Hovnanian Ventures for the residential component and Petrie Richardson for the commercial component. Petrie Richardson teamed up with their equity partner Prudential Insurance, and so they jointly owned, built, and operated the commercial component at Woodmore Town Center. About a year and a half ago, Prudential sold most of its holdings in Woodmore Town Center to Urban Edge, a publicly traded real estate development and construction company headquartered in Manhattan, with commercial real estate holdings throughout the United States. In any event, moving forward with the entitlements, we next went through the preliminary subdivision plan process, and that preliminary subdivision plan was approved by the Planning Board in September of 2006. It's 4-06016. And that preliminary subdivision plan went through the complete analysis, including adequacy of all public facilities for the entire 244.767 acres, constituting all of Woodmore Town Center, the commercial and the residential component. Every bit of the land area and the land development proposal was subjected to adequacy of facilities analysis, testing, and approval. And at the end of the day, when that preliminary plan was approved, it approved 1,079 residential dwelling units, which included 450 to 460 multifamily residential units, 208 single-family detached residential units, 162 residential townhomes, 108 mid-rise condominiums, 53 townhouse condominiums, and 98 2-over-2 units. 750,000 square feet of commercial retail space was approved, and 1 million square feet of commercial office space was approved. Added to that was the 360 hotel rooms. All of that was tested and approved. And the developer at that time, and this was, of course, the Petrie Richardson Prudential K. Hovnanian partnership entity. This project was tested at that time under what you might recall as being the 202 corridor study. It functioned like a road club. The transportation impact study that was prepared for this preliminary subdivision plan tested multiple intersections using the tested level of service of level of service D. There were multiple background developments that were included. There was a 2% growth factor, and all of this development was included in that traffic study. It was reviewed by the Transportation Division, by DPI, and by the State Highway Administration. All agencies recommended approval. Now, the nuance in that is that back in those days when the 202 corridor study was in play, all developments in this area, which were going to impact this road network, and in particular, it's, it was 202 and the Beltway and the Arena Drive interchange, which had to be constructed. There was a value assigned to all of those road improvements. It was over $45 million. And then the projects that were going to impact the corridor study area were assigned percentages in terms of responsibilities for road improvements. Woodmore Town Center was assigned a responsibility of approximately $8.45 million. I think Mr. Duffy, who now manages the commercial component of Urban Edge's holdings here, is going to testify today. But they made, if I'm not mistaken, they chose not to pay a fee, but to make improvements to make the roads better. And I think they were in the range of $12 to $15 million of road improvements that they made. So they went well above and beyond what their requirements were under the 202 corridor study. But suffice it to say that this project, which is before you today, has been tested for adequacy of transportation facilities. And in fact, when the preliminary subdivision plan was approved, and this is reflected in your transportation memorandum and in the analysis of transportation on page 36 of the staff report, there is a detailed analysis of the preliminary plan of subdivision that I just explained to you. And there was a trip cap for Woodmore Town Center, which was established at that time. And so the trip cap was 3,112 AM peak hour trips and 3,789 PM peak hour trips. To date, per the last detailed site plan that was approved, and that was for the Children's Hospital Medical Office Building, which is in Woodmore Town Center. To date, at that time, the trip cap was 988 AM trips and 2,333 PM trips, well below the established trip cap. The trip cap for these 284 multifamily units is 113 AM peak hour trips and 111 PM peak hour trips. Now, as we all know, that 113 and 111 means trips coming in and going out. So what you're talking about is really about a car a minute, and that's during the peak hour. When you add these trips, you're looking at a total trip generation rate today, if this is approved, of 1,111 AM peak hour trips and 2,443 PM peak hour trips. Thousands of trips beneath what the trip cap is and has been established for Woodmore Town Center. And of course, there's a reason for all that, because the MXT zone was designed to encourage development at the intersection of major transportation hubs. And here we have the Capital Beltway and Maryland 202. And what we have seen really by virtue of the anchor of Wegmans and the other support retail uses and the residential development, which actually was completed by D.R. Horton, not K. Hovnanian, but we have an immensely successful synergistic mixed-use development in the heart of Prince George's County. It's very successful, but it's also well beneath the transportation levels that have been established and approved for the development of this entire project. We did in 2015, and Mr. Chairman, you were not on the planning board at that time, but I think most of the other council member or planning board commissioners were. In 2015, we brought forward a revision to the conceptual site plan. The reason we did that is because the commercial developers, Petrie Richardson, had worked with national brokerage firms for over 10 years to try to attract a multifamily developer to come in and do vertically integrated mixed-use development. So in other words, it was originally thought that we were going to have all of the multifamily built above ground floor retail in the heart of the town center, right where the clock circle is. Excuse me, right where the clock tower is in one of the circles within the commercial component. That was the original plan. No multifamily developer would agree to do that. And the rationale was not because it wasn't a successful project, it was, but it was deemed to be too suburban in nature for vertically integrated mixed-use development. So finally, in order to encourage more rooftops, to make the commercial even more viable, my clients decided to process a revision to the conceptual site plan. And what we asked the planning board and the district council to do was to approve the relocation of up to 360 multifamily units out to the parcel that you see on the screen before you today, which is known as Outlot A. It's 20 plus acres. We went through that process and we explained why the vertically integrated mixed use would not work in the town center. We had Mr. Terry Richardson testify at length, and his testimony is captured in the resolution of approval about the efforts that they had undertaken to try to make that happen to no avail. The planning board approved up to 360 multifamily units to be developed on this property. The city of Glenarden opposed the development. They appealed to the district council. The district council also approved the conceptual site plan revision to locate up to 360 multifamily units on Outlot A. So what we're doing now is nothing more than coming in and filing, processing, and seeking approval for a detailed site plan for that which has been approved already to occur on this property within Woodmore Town Center. And that's why we're here today. We have a quality developer who is willing to undertake this effort and build a quality product. So that's just about all I'm going to say initially going through here. I know that our traffic engineers are going to be talking afterwards. I do want to say a little bit about the property. So if you're looking at the aerial photograph right here, St. Joseph's Church appears directly southeast of our Outlot A property. They are in the southwest quadrant of the intersection of St. Joseph's Drive and Ruby Lockhart Boulevard. For years, St. Joseph's Church has been asking for the developers of Woodmore Town Center to somehow provide a second point of ingress and egress for them so that their sole point of ingress and egress is not on St. Joseph's Drive. So Wood Partners has stepped up to the plate and has met with and committed to St. Joseph's Church to provide an easement and to construct a driveway connection from St. Joseph's Church property into what will be Lot 28 after Outlot A is replatted, so that the church will have a point of access onto Ruby Lockhart Boulevard. That's significant simply because it will allow patrons at St. Joseph's Church, particularly during Sunday services, to be able to come out, take a right on Ruby Lockhart Boulevard and go directly across St. Joseph's Drive and to take Ruby Lockhart Boulevard down past the Woodmore Overlook project, where a new public road has been constructed and is open to provide a second point of access onto Maryland 202, which has a free right-in, right-out turning movement associated with it as well. Or in the alternative, they can continue down Ruby Lockhart Boulevard to hit Lotsford Road and take a right or a left turn at that point in time. So basically, there are three different routes that can be taken for the church now, for their worshipers to leave the St. Joseph's Church property after their services. I can tell you from my personal conversations with the church, they are absolutely delighted that this is happening. They are also delighted that we are putting a 6-foot-high site-tight fence above, on top of, mounted on the retaining wall, which runs along our common property boundary with St. Joseph's Church. That is going to provide a visual screen from the multifamily residential from the church property. They're very happy with that change as well. The buildings themselves, you've seen, I think the 3D model is pretty spectacular. We have worked very closely with the staff to address just a couple of minor issues that we came up with relative to basically 3 or 4 of the conditions. But this particular project is going to have some fantastic amenities associated. 2 5-story buildings, U-shaped in nature, with outdoor courtyard amenities, one of which includes a heated pool with water jets and areas that you can sit within the pool, lounges, cabanas, fire pits, dining areas outside in the courtyard areas, dining areas inside a recreation facility, a 9,500 square foot fitness center, computer capability for residents to come down and plug their computers in and work within the internal recreation areas of the building, an outdoor children's playground, a pet spa, the dog park outside, and then of course the plan that we have to install dog stations at every location that we can fit them throughout the project, where we also have trash cans for the use of our residents. So there are going to be many opportunities for those to be placed inside of the project as well. I don't want to go too long, but there was a lot to say, particularly with regard to the history of the project. But with that being said, I would like to move on and just note that I filed a letter dated July 3rd of 2023. And Mr. Flanagan, is Mr. Flanagan with us today? If somehow someone could bring up just the site plan. Well, that's the aerial there.
Slide 8.
Okay.
Slide 8.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
There we go. All right, this is great. This is the rendered site and landscape plan that we prepared at staff's request. And by the way, I do want to note, if you look in the lower right-hand corner, you will see the access drive that we are constructing for St. Joseph's Church and for their worshipers. So the entirety of what is now Outlot A is, again, a little over 20 acres. There appears to be a lot of green up in the upper part of the drawing, and that is because we have PMA and we have floodplain, a lot of environmentally sensitive areas up there that we really can't touch. When we did the CSP revision in 2015, we noted that in conformance with the original CSP, there would be not just the multifamily residential on Outlot A, but there would be a retail commercial pad as well, which would have frontage on Ruby Lockhart Boulevard. So you see that generally outlined on the rendered site plan before you. But Outlot A is going to become partially, and the majority of which will become Lot 28 when we go to final plat. At that time, since there is no retail user for the pad site, we will be proposing to convert that to Outlot E. And that will be in the front. But Lot 28 will go all the way out to Ruby Lockhart Boulevard. And that's the sort of the gray driveway that you see immediately south of the area that will be the commercial pad. So conditions 1F and 1G, the staff reasonably said to us, at the time of certification of the detailed site plan, please identify the access easement that Outlot E, the commercial pad, will need. Unfortunately, at this point in time, not knowing what the commercial use will be, and certainly my client will not be part of that effort, we just wanted to clarify, and we did so in our letter, that at this point, we would have to say that the entire stem of that driveway could be burdened by a private access easement to benefit Outlot E. And we just wanted to make that clarification. And then relative to condition 20 of the conceptual site plan approval, the original conceptual site plan approval, that condition 20 said that multifamily buildings with elevations on street frontage would have 60% brick on their elevation. And so even though that condition was meant to apply when the multifamily was going to be down in the town center, because all commercial buildings in Woodmore Town Center have to have a minimum of 60% brick fronts, that condition still applies to us. So we wanted to work with staff to get an understanding of what sections of the two buildings would have that 60% brick frontage impact. And so we prepared an exhibit that I attached to my letter, just simply delineating the areas of the buildings in red, the two buildings. The building number 1, which is the one on the left, has frontage on the on-ramp from 202 to the Beltway. And building number 2 has its eastern frontage looking out toward Ruby Lockhart Boulevard. So we simply wanted to clarify where those elevations were that need 60% brick. And I believe staff agreed with that. We also had the 3 very minimal changes to condition 1H, dealing with the loading space, providing the option to provide an external loading space, which would be dimensioned properly. And then where we have the 2 internal spaces, we'll just label them as, an extra internal parking space. With regard to 1L1, there was a staff request to have all brick on the first floor of all the buildings. We wanted to just clarify that that would not include the internal courtyard elevations and recessed balconies. The architects met with staff and sort of explained that there was a particular architectural enhancement and look that they were trying to achieve with the balconies coming down. And so those areas they were hoping not to have as a requirement for all brick on the first level. Staff, I think, has agreed with that. And then we simply wanted to confirm that where the area was on the dog park, where the staff wanted the fence. And so we added a revision to condition 1N. I would like to verbally add one additional condition, if I could. Mr. Shelley brought to my attention that while the dog park is not a private recreational amenity per se, we had not provided a timeline when that dog park would be available to the residents. And so we would like to proffer that as follows, an additional condition. The dog park shall be constructed and available for use at the time of the first occupancy certificate for any unit. So we wanted to make sure that dog park was available right from the very beginning. And then I would only note that with the conditions that we changed, there would be very, very minimal changes to finding 2 on page 5 of the staff report, finding 6 on page 8, and finding 20 on page 36 of the staff report, just to add the wording in that occurs in those conditions that we just went over that we propose to modify. So with that being said, we appreciate the staff's recommendation of approval, and I appreciate your indulgence thus far in listening to me, and I'll be happy and will need to respond on rebuttal to any comments raised by opposition that I haven't addressed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbs. Mr. Shelley, do you need more time from Mr. Gibbs? Did you get all the things that he brought up toward the end?
Yes, good morning, Mr. Chair. Again, Andrew Shelley from the Urban Design section. Yes, I wrote down the condition, and staff would be agreeing with that.
Okay, thank you. All right, commissioners, we've heard from Mr. Gibbs. Any questions for him or any members of the applicant's team?
I did.
Commissioner Washman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, my question was actually the same as yours when you asked about the right in, right out. And I was just curious to understand or better understand. So for the residents of this property, if they're interested in going over to Wegmans, for example, unlike most of the circulation in that community, there are roundabouts, which keeps things moving. But there's not a roundabout at St. Joseph's and Ruby Lockhart, I don't believe. And so what is the thinking there? So if I live there and I want to go to Wegmans, I have to right out and then U-turn at the intersection?
Well, yes, Commissioner Washington, your question is very valid. First of all, let me just say this, that when this property was platted, a driveway apron was approved and constructed in which only permits right in, right out turns. There is no separation in the island separating the through lanes on Ruby Lockhart Boulevard at this location. And I'm happy to have Mr. Lenhart weigh in on this if you'd like to hear from him. But essentially, it was his opinion that seeking a separation in that island would create more problems than it would solve. And that, yes, there are circles that we find in many instances along Ruby Lockhart Boulevard, certainly down by Best Buy, and then certainly again up past where you would take the circle to come down to the clock tower, and then that circle as well. So 3 different circles there. There is no circle at the intersection of St. Joseph's Drive and Ruby Lockhart Boulevard. That was determined that it needed to be a signal controlled intersection, and that's what the original developers constructed. So the options would be, I guess you could make a U-turn there if you wanted. You could also make a left turn there and then go up to the next circle and go around that circle and then come back down and then take a right-hand turn on Ruby Lockhart Boulevard. So there is a circle that you can use to make a U-turn, but you would first make a left-hand turn at the intersection of Ruby Lockhart and St. Joseph's Drive. And I don't know, Mr. Lenhart, do you have anything you could add to that to make it a little clearer?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Gibbs.
By the way, just as a matter of protocol, since there is opposition in this case, Mr. Lenhart is well known as an expert in the field of transportation planning, and I'd like the planning board to, as it has on many prior occasions, recognize his qualifications in that regard.
So recognized.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Lenhart.
Yes,
Mr.
thank you. Yes, I was sworn in at the beginning,
Thank you.
certainly. So the question was for people making the right turn out of the site, if they wanted to go back up to Woodmore Town Center, let's say to go to the Wegmans or to the Costco, how would they do so once they got to the intersection of Ruby Lockhart at St. Joseph's Drive? That is a signalized intersection. There is a median, and the traffic signal is specifically set up with phasing that is split phase for both directions of Ruby Lockhart Boulevard. That means that if you are going eastbound on Ruby Lockhart, and you want to make a U-turn to return back to the Woodmore Town Center, you would have a green left turn arrow and nobody else at the intersection would be moving. No other movements would have a green arrow, including the other side of Ruby Lockhart, which would be red at that time. And so it would be unopposed, no conflicts for that movement. It would be very safe. The measurement I'm going off here indicates that there's about 51 feet diameter for that U-turn. AASHTO design guideline indicates that that is more than enough room for passenger vehicles to make a U-turn. And so it would be safe and available as a U-turn for people to get back to Woodmore Town Center. Mr. Gibbs also indicated that there is, if someone would want to make a left turn onto St. Joseph's, they could go north to the roundabout and at Grove Hust Lane and make a U-turn at that roundabout, and then they could come back to the south and make a right on Ruby Lockhart to get to Woodmore Town Center. That would be the alternative. So there would be two safe and effective means of doing that movement.
Okay, well, that's certainly helpful to understand that there's a dedicated left turning signal. I'm in that area often, but I never travel that way, so I just didn't know that. So I'm glad to hear that there is that, because I worried about people trying to make a U-turn and then there's oncoming traffic across the other side of Ruby Lockhart. So
right.
Thank you.
Certainly.
I'm sure there'll be other questions, but let me build off that, Commissioners, real quick. So if I lived at this, we approved this, and if I live there, how am I getting into the site? I'm going up to the roundabout, the traffic circle up above, and going around that traffic circle and then coming into the site?
That's correct. That's correct. And the roundabouts are proven and shown to be one of the safest forms of traffic control. It limits the points of conflicts. They are safer than signalized intersections, and they operate very well and efficient. So it's and when you would look at it and think about it, you initially would think, well, it's a circuitous route. It takes me out of my way, but it's maybe 1,000 feet, and you make a U-turn and you come back. It's not far.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of roundabouts. So if I live there, I'd be going through the church.
Exactly.
Unless the church is going to block that off. And I'm not saying that's even a bad thing. I'm just saying, Mr. Lenhart, hold the thought. I mean, if Mr. Burrell, Mr. Gibbs, if we could bring on the developers a bit on this, just to be engaged in this conversation as well. I'm just curious about this.
Yeah, but I would say that first of all, I would assume that the church is going to put a gate on that driveway. But going into the church parking lot is really not going to help you, because that would only take you out to St. Joseph's Drive, where you'd have to make a right-hand turn and go out to 202.
Right. And I believe that Maryland law, and I know this used to be the case, Maryland law states that it is illegal to cut through private property to avoid a traffic control device. And so, for somebody to come out Ruby Lockhart, make a right turn, to go down to St. Joseph's and make a right turn, and if they decided they wanted to go through the church to avoid that movement, which I don't believe there would be any benefit in doing so. It's all right turns. There's really no true benefit. I think it would take you the same amount of time, basically. But if they decided to do that, that would be against Maryland law. The church, as Mr. Gibbs indicated, would probably put up a gate to prevent that, if that's the case.
Well, maybe coming home. So if you're on 202 and then you turn on to St. Joseph Drive, correct me if I'm wrong, but you can make a left turn right into the church yard.
You can.
You can,
Right.
yes.
You can do that. That's correct. Yeah.
Right. So I'm saying, so that what I heard the chairman in your question, to me, that might be the way I would choose to go home, as opposed to taking the left turn on Ruby Lockhart, going up to the roundabout and coming back and then coming through the right entrance. I think that's what you were getting at.
Yeah, and I'm not saying there's anything fundamentally wrong with that. And to your point, Mr. Gibbs, the church very well may just put up a gate to stop that pattern. But there's, setting aside what the law is, humans are humans, and it's a pretty circuitous route to get in and out of this development. At some level, it's neither here nor there, but that's why I wanted to talk to the developers a bit, just to get a sense of what their thinking is around this. So if I can hear from Mr. Burrell or Mr. Zimmerly or Mr. Albert on this. And
Sure.
So two questions. One is, as the developer, what is your thinking about the access? And also, I'm curious if there are any conversations about any kind of direct access to Woodmore Town Center, even bike ped direct access to Woodmore Town Center. This feels very disconnected from the center.
And
Okay.
I could speak, Ed. This is Scott
Sure.
Zimmerly with Wood Partners. Don't have too much different to say than what Mr. Lienhart already said as far as how it would function. Just given the site location, I think Ed proffered early on, like we can't get access out onto 202. It's right by an exit ramp. That would never happen, so we can't do that. We're constrained with the wetlands on over half of the site next to us, and the only road frontage we have, again, prior approved with the curb cut, right there is in front of us at Ruby Lockhart. So it's right in, right out, unless someone gave us a left in, and that was explored. And as you heard earlier, that was deemed not efficient. So, we've been okay with the left turn up at the light that was explained. And I think it's important to note the roundabout it's very close. Understand the question, if that was, quarter mile down the road to have to come home and turn around, but it's not. It's a matter of feet. And because it's not a light, it's pretty quick to go around and very efficient. And it's just one more, Mike Lienhart's the expert, but it's one more turn, quote unquote, to get home, right? Going to a light and taking a left to go down your street to then turn into your community. This is the same thing as coming up to a circle, and instead of taking a left, you're going around, coming back and taking a right into your community. It just seems circuitous because, to your point, if you're coming in off 202, you would pass the property because you can't make a left across the lane. So we don't disagree with the question and then what you're thinking. But if you think about going home, it's just one more left turn. It's just you go past to make a left and come home. It's a 20-second, topic for somebody. But that's all that we're allowed to do. Yeah, I appreciate that.
And was there any conversations about any kind of direct bike ped access? Was there any conversation about a trail, a bridge, or something connected?
There is. Mr. Chairman, there's already an existing pedestrian sidewalk directly in front of this property running down to the section of Woodmore Town Center, where the Best Buy, Starbucks, Copper Canyon is located. That gets you right into the center. There's also already a bike lane there. Those were constructed early on when the road was constructed. And to your point about being separated, I mean, if you look at it from this rendered plan, if you look directly across the street, that's LA Fitness. And a very short distance down to your left is Starbucks, Best Buy, Copper Canyon, and everything that leads you into the heart of the center. This parcel is really no more removed than any of the residential pieces are up on the far eastern section of the development.
And that was my question. So the bike path access is direct and along Ruby Lockhart. And
It is.
again, was there any conversation at all about a more varied connection from the development across the wetlands, any kind of a trail access? Because that's a pretty short, I mean, that'd be a nice amenity for this development. I'm just curious for the developers, if you were engaged in any kind of conversation with Woodmore Town Center about that with the developers.
Not that I'm aware of, because that entire area is so heavily burdened by sensitive environmental features. We looked at the possibility of just putting some internal trail up in that area, and the PMA and then beyond the PMA is all floodplain. So I just don't know if you would ever get authority to build a trail through that.
That and it's hard to note on this plan, but in some areas, and Jason can correct me if I'm wrong, if not most areas to the north on this plan, that's a 15-foot drop, the slope down into those wetlands. So it's not as simple as it would perceive to be, I guess, looking at it. So.
Okay, all right, that's helpful. I just wanted to engage this way and hear what you all were thinking about it, and
Sure.
you've answered my questions. So. Commissioners, other questions? I think Commissioner Giraldo, you had some.
I did. My only question, Mr. Gibbs, is there any provision for EV charging and the multi-unit?
Yes, there will be some EV charging stations. I don't know if the number has been established yet. Mr. Zimley, can you respond to that?
Yes, there will be. I don't recall the exact count, but we're all for EV stations. Residents like them. We like them. I just don't know if we have the set count. But Jason, if you recall the number, you could proffer it, but we will have some.
Okay,
yeah,
great.
we don't have a set number at this time, but there will definitely be EV charging stations. Every one of our deals that we have done in the last 8 years has EV charging.
So is that a proffer, Mr. Gibbs?
Yes, it is, Commissioner. Yes,
Okay.
it is. And quite frankly, I think maybe the wording for that might be that we show those at the time of certification of the detailed site plan.
That'd be great.
Great. Thank you. No further questions, Mr. Gibbs.
Thank you, sir.
All right, any other questions, Commissioners? If not, we'll turn to folks who've signed up to speak. And again, the applicant will have a chance for rebuttal. I have a few folks on my list. I just want to first run through to see who is here. We have Erica Fareed with the City of Glenarden. Ms. Fareed, you here?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, thank you. And Cynthia Gray?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Anthony Foster?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Derek Curtis?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. And Kagame Liaping?
It's Kajami. Yes, I'm here.
Okay, thank you. All right, everyone is here. I'm going to start with the representative of the City of Glenarden. For folks who are speaking, you have up to 3 minutes to speak. We'll give more latitude to the representative of the City of Glenarden, representing the city such as it is. So you'll have the time that you need. And then for other folks, you'll have up to 3 minutes to speak. There'll be a clock that'll show up just to help you and me manage the time. And we'll start with Erica Fareed. Take it away. If you could introduce yourself for the record. And then
Yes.
the floor is yours.
Thank you. My name is Erica Fareed, and I'm a councilman with the City of Glenarden. I represent
council
Ward
member, I
3.
apologize.
I'm sorry.
I didn't realize you were a council member. I apologize. Thank you.
That's okay. I'm a councilman with the City of Glenarden, representing Ward 3, which is the area in which Alta Woodmore would be located. I'm pleased to hear, some of the concerns that have been discussed thus far, because they echo some of the concerns that myself and other citizens have, particularly around the traffic. I am concerned about the way that the development will be accessed. And hearing the conversation now around how people will be able to access the Wilmore Town Center, I think we really need to look at that and the practicality of it. We're talking about a lane, one lane that has left turn and now also allows people to go straight to go over to the other side of St. Joseph's Drive where the new developments are. And expecting people to make a U-turn from that lane is going to cause, I think, significant issue with the current traffic, as well as the fact that people coming from St. Joseph's on the side of LA Fitness, they can make a right turn on red. So while potentially cars are looking to make U-turns, those cars will also be looking to make right turns. And I just think that's dangerous. Further, the way that people will access it when they're coming home, if they're coming from 202, to have to go through that roundabout just doesn't seem practical. If we're looking at isolated scenarios where there are one or two cars, maybe that works. But when we're talking about a busy evening, that intersection already is extremely crowded with two turn lanes. There are 4 lanes, but only 2 of them can turn left. That is going to cause extreme congestion. Now, off on 202, if you're coming in at rush hour, you'll be sitting on 202 with that light changing for several times before you can actually even turn onto St. Joseph. So I think we really need to look at this traffic. I don't know when the traffic study was done, but I'm not sure I think it needs to be updated. I think one of the bigger concerns that I have as well is around the fact that this apartment development is being placed here when we have just had several other apartment developments in new townhomes built right across the street. I don't know if that was a part of the plan back in 2005, but I think when we're talking about looking at properties or looking at developments, we need to be looking at them in the current times. 2005 was a long time ago, and there's been a lot of development since then. Thirdly, I'm very concerned with the fact that the city of Glenarden has not been engaged throughout this process. I feel like this seems to be typical that things are happening even decades in advance and not really engaging the local municipalities, and then decisions are being made and we're being brought in at the point of just being able to say, here's a site plan, give us your feedback, as opposed to really being a part of the planning and design to see what is needed in our community and make sure that whatever space is being used there is of benefit to the community. We would hate for a property to be placed there and find that there aren't enough people, for example, to be able to rent out those apartments, and we have a lot of vacancies, that perhaps that space could have been used for something differently. So I know I'm kind of running up on my time, but I just wanted to address those points. Primarily, if we could address the traffic concerns, and then address, some of the concerns around the congestion and the other planning that's in that area, and what the plan is for that. That would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, council member. I'm sure that the applicant will address some of your questions and concerns on rebuttal, and I appreciate you taking the time to speak on this. Let's move on to Cynthia Gray. If you could
good morning.
Introduce yourself for the record.
Good morning. My name is Cynthia Gray. I am a Woodmore Town Center resident. As a resident, I experience firsthand on a daily basis walking and driving to the shopping center, LA Fitness, and all the nearby amenities around the proposed dwelling. I oppose this dwelling for the simple fact that having an entry and exit point on Ruby Lockhart is going to cause further congestion exiting the community and shopping center. That specific area is already congested, and it would only divert traffic out onto Campus Way North out of the shopping center. And without any current and active traffic calming initiatives, this poses a severe safety risk to me, my children, the community members, and all who frequent the park and shopping center. There needs to be an alternative entry point to alleviate these issues. There needs to be active planned traffic and safety initiatives for both Ruby Lockhart and Campus Way North. Lastly, I have a major concern that these new developments are not taking into account the influx of children that will feed into our local schools without proper funding and support. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gray. Next, we have Anthony Foster.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to provide comments on this proposal. I live on Campus Way North, and I'm a member of the Master HOA and the condo HOA that's nearby on the other side of the development. I believe this is the wrong development in the wrong place. Folks, don't be fooled by dog parks, lounges, cabanas, pet grooming spas, fire pits, and courtyards. If you look across the street, you will see two large apartment complexes, the Woodmore Grand and the Woodmore Apartments, already in full force in our community. Notably, the GIS model, while it's nice, doesn't show the fact that there are two large apartment complexes across the street. To me, it's overkill. Mr. Linhart, I respect your expertise with transportation, but I don't think you really deal with the conditions here on a day-to-day basis. You have stats on paper, but it's another thing to live it every day. With regards to the roundabouts, folks, if you've been in the area over the past couple of years, you would see people don't know how to drive those roundabouts really safely. So I'm leery every time I go through the roundabouts because I'm afraid of someone actually going into the wrong lane. And that has happened, and that's bearing out through the accident stats, which could be easily pulled by the City of Glenarden Police Department. It's clear to me, I'm not sure to others, that the developer wants to build on the land, sell the finished product to maximize profit for their benefit, not for the City of Glenarden or the surrounding community. Mr. Gibbs talks about the applicant knowing about the county and the community at large, but if he did know about the community at large, he would not have put this on the table to begin with, and instead recognize that there are other options for development in this area, such as maybe an assisted living facility, a dialysis center, a high quality restaurant pad. And I want to stop there. We only have Copper Canyon. So to me, it's a no brainer if you want to bring in another amenity to our area, or perhaps a rehabilitation center, an animal hospital, or something else besides apartments. You know, we deserve better. And I want to emphasize that we deserve better, and we can get more than just apartments. And I'm glad you brought up Tribeca. According to residents, it's gotten progressively worse after changing ownership multiple times. Why in the world would we accept this here? Enough is enough. We need development that supports our quality of life and complements the city and the county. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Foster. Appreciate you taking the time. Derek Curtis.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Councilman Derek Curtis with the City of Glenarden. I speak in opposition to this project. I first want to say I do appreciate Mr. Gibbs and developers to come to our meeting late. They didn't come to me late, but to speak with us about this presentation. I think it was about a couple of weeks ago. It was a nice presentation, but as Mr. Foster said, I just think that it's just a really bad location for this project. I think one of the first things that we're doing here in the City of Glenarden is questioning, what are we doing? Does it make sense? Is this project going to meet the needs of the area and of the citizens? And I don't believe it does. I think the motive of the project is to make a profit, and that's to no shame of Mr. Gibbs and his clients. But to make a profit shouldn't be the only thing we consider when we're considering a project in our community. We risk the success of the much needed town center that we have, because if you have come over here recently, you would know that with the additional construction across St. Joseph Drive, the traffic is horrible. The traffic is backed up all the way to 202, and now you have 3 lanes blocked up trying to make a left turn on Ruby Lockhart
And then you go down there, and if you want the residents of those apartment buildings to go a roundabout, well, there are many accidents on that roundabout. There are accidents every week on that roundabout of people just not driving the roundabout the way they should. It's a speedway, and it just creates a lot of congestion. And so to add an apartment building there, where the residents themselves who will live there will only have one access to enter and exit. That's not fair to them. And I've also heard that, oh, well, they could, make a left turn at St. Joseph Drive, make a left turn or U-turn. But imagine trying to come out, because it curves out. It doesn't just come directly out. When you go in, you curve right in, and then you curve right out. There's not going to be opportunity for those residents to cut across 2 lanes of traffic to make either that left turn or that U-turn. That's just asking for someone to get in an accident. The virtual 3D tool that's been used to repeatedly show the project is a little bit misleading because it doesn't take into account, it shows nice trees around the project, but it doesn't take into account that those trees are no longer there. There are apartment buildings there across the street from St. Joseph Drives. There's a 7-Eleven that's there. There's a Chick-fil-A that's there. We can spend all day trying to rationalize this, but it just does not make sense. This location does not make sense. There aren't enough amenities to make this make sense. The bike lane for the residents that will go into the apartment complex, the bike lane, those bikers will be endangered now. The emergency vehicles, depending if you have an emergency vehicle coming off of 202 and coming around, it takes them more time to get into the complex. If people are trying to get out of the complex, because in case of a fire, well, they have the option of staying in a burning building or trying to get out and retreating to a 15-foot drop in the wetlands. Again, I appreciate the idea. I appreciate the need the desire to build something beautiful, but it's just not the right place for it. We have to make it practical for not only the residents that already live here, but also the residents that are planning to live in that apartment building. So I asked the planning committee to, please, reconsider this. Take into consideration the city council, the residents, and the potential residents of that apartment building. That it's not safe, and from a traffic pattern, it's not practical. And with all due respect to the traffic expert on board, we can all find somebody that can agree with us. That's the point. You have to come here now to witness what is occurring now, to really get a good sense of how it will be in the future. So thank you for your time, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you, council member. I appreciate it. Finally, we have Kajame Leah King.
Thank you. My name's Kajami. I'm just a resident of the neighborhood. I echo what a lot of my fellow peers already said, and thank you to Commissioner Washington and Shapiro for your comments as well, because you asked my questions. My main thing is really just the one way in, one way out. I just don't see how that makes sense, and also how is that safe? The last councilwoman just mentioned, for police and our fire department to get in, there's no easy way for them to do that in a quick and efficient way. For example, the LA Fitness across the street is only a one way in and one way out, and even that's annoying. So I could imagine how that would be for a development for 284 units, which is about 1,000 people, which will also add to the congestion that's already in the area. Which brings me to the point about just the practicality of it. Sure, you can make a U-turn. Sure, you can turn left and go around that roundabout. But let's be real, nobody wants to do that. It's just going to add more headache to the people doing that, and increase the chances of an accident that's already has occurred in that area as well. And in addition to that congestion, how are we keeping in mind just the schooling already? Our local police force and fire department are already inundated with just requests, and they're swamped, and now you're adding more people here. I just don't think we're looking at the big picture here. So I'll just ask the commission to just keep that in mind. And also recognize that a lot of residents actually feel this way. They just, don't have the means of getting into a meeting like this, but just look at the big picture here and if this actually makes sense and is practical for this time in that specific location. Thank you.
Thank you. We have no one else signed up to speak on this.
Chair, if I may, this is Chris Duffy with Heritage Partners. For some reason, I wasn't on your list, but I am on to speak on behalf of the proposed development and in favor of it, if I could have a few seconds to do so.
Mr. Duffy, yes, you may proceed.
Thank you. For those of you that don't know, I'm with Heritage Partners. I'm president and founder of the company. Heritage Partners has evolved out of what was Petrie Richardson, the original developers of Woodmore Town Center, and we now manage it on behalf of Urban Edge. On behalf of both parties, we'd like to pledge our support. And if I could also talk briefly about traffic and the history. Woodmore Town Center, we could have paid $8.5 million into a road club, as Mr. Gibbs suggested. We did over $17 million in road improvements. At the time when we started this project, the intersections that didn't fail from capacity worked at a level service D. Today, they work at level B or better, and that contemplates additional development, including this. So from a traffic standpoint, things have improved, and we think this is a quality development, and we'd like to pledge our support for it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Duffy. That is all the folks we have signed up to speak. I will turn, Commissioners, any questions for any of the folks to speak? I think we've heard loud and clear the concerns. No questions. I'll turn to Mr. Gibbs on rebuttal.
Yes, thank you. My apologies, Mr. Gibbs. This is Andrew Shelley from staff from Urban Design. I just also wanted to ask the chair, specifically staff had asked for a mid-block crossing analysis, which was dealing with bicycle and pedestrian improvements at this location, and also wanted to ask the chair if the board wanted to hear from internal staff that are experts in transportation.
Mr. Schneider, I'm glad you brought that up. I would like to hear, I imagine my fellow commissioners would as well. So yes, if you have the transportation staff, especially, I mean, there's the traffic piece, but there's also the bike ped piece. So a few minutes from staff would be helpful, Mr. Shelley. Mr. Gibbs, hold off on rebuttal until we hear more from staff.
Surely.
Good. Hi, Chair Shapiro and members of the board. This is Benjamin Ryan with the Transportation Planning Section. Regarding the location of the site, the only available frontage was along Ruby Lockhart. We didn't think it was realistic proposal to look for access along the 202 portion near the interchange. So with that into account, we did examine that the location where vehicles would access the site was a sufficient site distance from the signal at St. Joseph's and Ruby Lockhart, which we did found it was. We did not think a left turn into the site or a left turn from the site onto westbound Ruby Lockhart was really a workable idea at this location. That would have increased the traffic and the stacking immensely. As Mr. Shelley mentioned, we asked for a mid-block crosswalk analysis at the time of SDRC to see if it was possible to get bike and ped movement across Ruby Lockhart Drive. The study indicated that the location of the crosswalk in relation to the intersection of St. Joseph's and Ruby Lockhart could result in potential conflicts with bicyclists and pedestrians and motorists. It's about 330 feet, and the driver behavior may not anticipate bicyclists and pedestrians crossing. And further, as has been discussed, both sides of Ruby Lockhart have constructed bicycle lanes and sidewalks. So there is bicycle and pedestrian access throughout the site. There, as has been discussed, there are a number of circuitous routes to access the site. But again, we wanted to maintain the median to not have further traffic implications, which if we were to allow full left turns into the site or out of the site, that could cause longer term delays. As has been discussed, the preliminary plan set adequacy for the site. If you think of the Woodmore Shopping Center, there are other portions that fall under other preliminary plans. So we're really looking at this one in relation to 4-06016, and there is available trip cap with this. The apartments themselves are anticipated to produce 113 AM peak trips and 111 PM. While sizable, this is not anticipated to add a heavy burden to the road network that's in place. So that's what we would have on this.
I'm sorry, Mr. Ryan, were you finished or was it a technical issue? You okay?
No, I'm finished.
Okay. Quick question, Mr. Ryan. Were you a part of any conversation that was looking at any kind of alternative access, any sort of path from the development directly into Woodmore Town Center off of Ruby Lockhart? Was that any conversation you were a part of?
I'm sorry, a path along.
I'm still stuck on the idea of, is there some way to access the development, but not on Ruby Lockhart?
Yeah, the slope to the direct northwest of the site, which would lead to the commercial portion, that is a heavy slope and wouldn't provide safe movement for bicycles and pedestrians along that area.
Okay, so that's something that you were in conversation about at least at some point.
Yes, when we received the plans, we did look for additional ways of providing bicycle and pedestrian connections to the commercial portion. It really is the kind of unique location of this site, with only having frontage along Ruby Lockhart and having a heavily environmentally protected area between the site and the commercial portion.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ryan. That's helpful. I'm glad you that was at least talked about. Commissioners, questions for staff? Questions for Mr. Ryan?
I do have a question. It's not for this person, however. One of the individuals from Glenarden made a reference to the informational mailing, and I was wondering, when did that informational mailing take place and did it go to folk within the city of Glenarden? I think one of the council members mentioned receiving something.
So that's a question for Mr. Gibbs, the applicant, I assume?
I don't know. I'm just trying to find out if it occurred, if when and who did receive information about this project from other developers. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, this is James Hunt with the Development Review Division. Just to kind of clarify here, what happened with this situation is the contact information for the city of Glenarden was not updated. So we had someone, Mr. Estes, as well as, I think it was Mr. or Mrs. Tobias, on file as the contact person for Glenarden. However, that was the incorrect information. When we found that out, we did contact them, and that's how they were aware of that. I guess may have been aware of that today. I don't have the exact date the informational mailing went out, which I can turn to. I think Mr. Shelley could probably find that out for you. But otherwise, we did send a referral out to the city of Glenarden. It's just the fact that that was the wrong person that we had on file, because their contact information was not updated at that time.
Okay, and we do have the correct information now.
Correct. That's absolutely correct. We do have some other development applications coming in, and we've since then updated that, so they're going to be getting those referrals. The correct person will be getting those referrals.
Mr. Chair, this is Councilman Curtis. Just to add to the answer, if I may.
Briefly, Mr. Curtis, but yes.
Yeah, so the two people that the gentleman before me referenced were, one of them was the elected official who was no longer the mayor of the city of Glenarden, and the other was a former city manager from, I think, maybe like 14, 15 years ago. And so we were made aware of this very late, and which is why we only met with Mr. Gibbs and the client, I think, 2 weeks ago. So we were just made aware of this. So thank you.
Thank you, council member. Thank you, Mr. Hunt. Vice Chair Bailey, other questions?
Well, I don't have any other questions, but there's been a lot of discussion about the roundabout, and I have to tell you, the roundabouts have increased my religion, because every time I go through one, I start praying because I can't follow the roundabouts, and it's just always confusing for me. And as much as I enjoy going to Woodmore, that area, to some of the places, the stores, the shops, and all of that kind of stuff, it really is somewhat complicated to me. So I'm glad that we're looking at it carefully, and hopefully that we can continue to improve and make it better in terms of folk visiting that area and that transportation. But to me, it's just, as I said at the beginning, it has increased my religion. I don't understand it. I really don't.
Oh, boy.
It's hard to follow.
Thank you, Vice Chair Bailey. Commissioners, other questions? Commissioner Washington.
I do for Mr. Ryan. I just want, and this is a relatively short distance between like the last roundabout by the Best Buy, if you will, up to like the intersection of St. Joseph's and Ruby Lockhart. But I wonder, were there any discussions or thoughts about other, and I say traffic calming or just ways, because I'm thinking if I'm leaving the Best Buy, I'm on the roundabout, I'm headed towards the intersection of St. Joseph and Ruby Lockhart, I'm probably speeding up a little bit more because I know I'm only going to a red light. I'm not approaching another roundabout. I mean, I don't know, does a speed bump, or Mr. Ryan, I would defer to your expertise, but does anything make sense? Because I'm thinking even for the people coming out of the development, there would be no, and this is a question actually, no like merge lane. I mean, they would be coming out immediately into the oncoming traffic, right? So I just wonder, was there any discussion about how to help manage that flow, or?
So in terms of residents accessing Ruby Lockhart from the site access location, the applicant, Mr. Lenhart's study indicated about 330 feet from the site access to the intersection of St. Joseph's and Ruby Lockhart. Prince George's County does not have corner clearance requirements, but we look to SHA, which they recommend at least 200 for a site like this. So in that sense, the residents turning onto Ruby Lockhart do have sufficient weaving space to get to the intersection. Regarding the safety of the roundabout near the Best Buy to the intersection in question, you know, it's 2 lanes. There's a median on one side and a bicycle lane in place on the other. You know, the drivers would see that they are approaching an intersection and, you know, would hopefully slow down as they approach this. I've heard a lot of complaints about traffic in this location. I haven't specifically a speed issue within the internal roadways, but yeah, I think that portion of Ruby Lockhart operates sufficiently. Doesn't necessarily need any traffic calming devices.
All right, Commissioner Washington.
I'm kind of noodling what I just heard because it's just an area that I frequent often. So I'm sensitive to, you know, not only where the applicant finds themselves in terms of just few to no other options, but just the reality of movements and circulation in that area. And I guess the other thing for me too is, yeah, there are bicycle lanes, but if we're talking about accessing the commercial side of this from the property, then I would be biking in ongoing in incoming traffic if I'm going Ruby Lockhart, because otherwise I'd have to go up to the intersection, cross over, and then come use the bike lane down from on the LA Fitness side, right?
That is correct. And as I had mentioned, there was a mid-block crossing analysis where, you know, we had this exact scenario in mind. And while it would be ideal to allow a mid-block crossing at Ruby Lockhart at this location, the mid-block crossing analysis, it gives a sufficient linear foot distance from which drivers turning onto Ruby Lockhart would be able to see a mid-block crossing and see possible pedestrians and bicyclists using that path. There's an anticipation when drivers turn left from St. Joseph's onto Ruby Lockhart that they're only going to be moving straight along that roadway. The mid-block crossing analysis indicated there could be potential safety implications with vehicles turning left onto Ruby Lockhart if a mid-block crossing was allowed at that location.
No, I understand that, and I was clear about that when you commented on it earlier. I guess my point was there's just no easy way for them to access the commercial without there being some sort of risk, whether I'm on a bike or whether I'm in my car. I mean, that's kind of where I'm landing. And I'm wanting somebody to help me understand it differently or better, quite frankly.
The site constraints in this case do make movement into and out of the site. It's a unique case in that sense. But yes, in this case, bicyclists would turn out of the site, go up to the intersection and use the crosswalks to cross to then access the westbound site of Ruby Lockhart to use that bicycle lane.
And Mr. Chairman, he questioned access through the, I guess the PMA area into the commercial side, Is it a 15-foot drop the entire length of the property? I mean, did you consider maybe looking at a bridge or another crosswalk, maybe lower on the property or at a different point?
We examined, we did not think it was feasible. It's a very steep slope the entire way across. It was examined when the application was received, but you know, upon looking at the environmental slope and that area is somewhat designed as a buffer as well. It doesn't allow for a pedestrian or bicycle access to the commercial portion along that part of the property.
Okay, I'll stop there, Mr. Chairman, and hear what Mr. Gibbs has to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioners, any other questions? All right, so let's turn to Mr. Gibbs. You are on rebuttal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm going to make a few preliminary comments, and I'm going to ask Mr. Lenhart to address the fears and concerns that have been raised relative to traffic. But a couple comments first, and then I want to just conclude after he finishes. First of all, the informational mailing was sent pursuant to our affidavit on December 2nd, 2022. And the affidavit of mailing contains a list of all those persons who received the mailing. The current mayor of Glen Arden, Mayor Kashina Cross, received one of those mailings, as did just the city of Glen Arden. The acceptance mailing, the mailing that we have to send out immediately prior to the time that the case is accepted, that was sent on April 25th of 2023. So we got accepted maybe a week after that, but it was sent on April 25th of 2023, and it was sent once again to the list provided to us by staff, and also once again included in that acceptance mailing was Mayor Kashina Cross, Council Member Erica Fareed, and the city of Glen Arden in general. I would have not been able, the list grew from the time of the informational mailing to the acceptance mailing. And I haven't had a chance to go through it all, but on the very first, there's 3 pages of lists of mailings. And the very first one is Mayor Cross, and the third one is Councilwoman Fareed. So those notices did go out, and in further comment to the representation that was made about not hearing anything until recently, I personally called the city of Glen Arden on April 26th of 2023. I spoke to Ms. Habata, who I understood at that time was the city manager or city clerk. And I asked her when she would like us to come to make a presentation to the mayor and city council. I also, on that same day at 2:45, via email, which I'm more than happy to provide, sent an email to Ms. Habata. And on that email, I attached our application, our justification statement, and all of our site plan and elevation drawings. I then again, on May 16th, spoke directly with Mayor Cross. I reiterated our willingness to meet with the mayor and city council because I had never heard anything back from Ms. Habata. And I forwarded to Mayor Cross my email of April 26th to Ms. Habata, and as well as all of the attachments that I had sent to Ms. Habata. So that was 2 times we contacted them and offered to meet. Then more recently, I received a telephone call from an individual who identified herself, I believe, as the new city clerk or city manager. Ms. Habata, I guess, had left. And I said, well, she said, well, we want to schedule you guys to come in. And I said, sure, we've been happy to come in. We've been trying to do it. And she said, well, will you send me the application materials? And I said, well, I've sent it twice. I'll be happy to send it a 3rd time. And she looked and she said, oh yeah, we do have that here. But I said, don't worry, I'll send it yet again. So I sent it 3 times, and that led to our meeting on June 21st. But to be certain, we were trying to outreach to the city of Glen Arden since before our case was accepted, and offered to meet with the mayor and city council to make our presentation. And there's a little more that we could do beyond that. Once again, I'm happy to send copies of these emails to anybody who may wish to have them. I would also say that having been the attorney of record for every entitlement application which has been filed at Woodmore Town Center, I have reached out to and made presentations to the mayor and city council of Glen Arden on every case that I've filed, and including the revision to the conceptual site plan that moved these multifamily units to this particular site. And indeed for the very first conceptual site plan that set the varying types and numbers of residential units to be developed within Woodmore Town Center. So, you know, I respect, very deeply respect the views of all the council members at the city right now. but we have really, I mean, we've never shut the city out from any participation or knowledge of anything historically or currently that we've been doing at Woodmore Town Center. Almost all these comments were about traffic, and I would say many of these comments are about off-site traffic issues, which are really not part of the legal criteria for an analysis of a detailed site plan. You know, how the intersection of St. Joseph's Drive and Ruby Lockhart Boulevard, or Maryland 202 and St. Joseph's Drive functions is, you know, that's a preliminary subdivision plan issue, not a detailed site plan issue. But I know that Mr. Lenhart has looked at, we were asked to look at whether or not an accel decel lane at our site entrance could be helpful or would be needed. Mr. Lenhart did that study. His study was filed into the record on July 3rd. And I'd like him to address that. I mean, if the planning board would like us to look at that further, we're happy to do it. But I would like, because almost all the testimony has been restricted to traffic issues, I really would like to have Mr. Lenhart go through that again with you, including his understanding of how the traffic signal even though it's not a relevant issue from a legal standpoint, how the traffic signal at St. Joseph's and Ruby Lockhart functions. Mr. Lenhart, could you please help us out?
And let me step in before Mr. Lenhart goes. I mean, this is the dilemma, right? That the preliminary subdivision was approved 17 years ago. Now, granted, as Mr. Lenhart has pointed out, you know, it meets the basic criteria. And then we all know who live and work around this area that there's all sorts of ongoing issues. But I want to be clear with, I'm talking to myself as well as my fellow commissioners and folks in the public. What is before us are not these traffic issues, because that's something that's decided at preliminary plan subdivision. They have a valid approval for that. And so I understand Mr. Gibbs wants to be respectful and make sure that Mr. Lenhart is coming before us to answer questions that we've heard. But again, I caution all of us that it's stepping beyond the bounds of what is before us with the detailed site plan. I'm certainly going to allow it because I'm curious about it. Folks in the community are as well. And so I'll leave it at that. Mr. Gibbs, you've turned it to Mr. Lenhart. Mr. Lenhart, take it away.
Yes. So I've taken a few notes here. I'd like to address some of the comments that were raised, and I'll start with the number of trips generated by the subdivision, with 113 a.m. and 111 p.m. trips. That's combined in and out trips. That equates to about 1 trip per minute for in or outbound traffic. It's you know, it's a relative, it's not a low traffic generator, but it's a relatively low traffic generator compared to other uses. And when you think of it in terms of one trip outbound per minute, let's say, if you've got a 2 or 3 minute cycle length of the signal at St. Joseph, that's 2 to 3 vehicles per cycle length that it's adding. It's not, it's relatively small impact when you look at the overall scheme of things. The accel decel lanes, as Mr. Ryan and Mr. Gibbs indicated, DPI had asked us to look at whether accel and decel lanes were warranted here. DPI does not have their own criteria, but State Highway Administration does, and DPI often defers to the state in these types of instances. So we utilize the state highway guidelines for looking at whether accel decel lanes are warranted, and they are. It's not even close. They're clearly not warranted in this situation. We provided that information to DPI. We ultimately, DPI issues the permit for the access, and so if they agree that they're not warranted, they won't be required. If we work through it with them and they say, well, we believe that they are warranted, then we will have to provide them. But it's an access issue through the permitting agency, and ultimately they have the authority to require or not require those. There was some discussion about roundabout safety, and the commissioner, indicated that she's has some discomfort, and I think there were some other people that talked about crashes and roundabouts. We're not claiming that there are no crashes in roundabouts. Crashes happen at nearly every intersection, but roundabouts, the data shows that roundabouts clearly have far fewer personal injury accidents. Most of the crashes that occur at roundabouts are side swipes. They're, minor property damage. They're not, I'm not saying injuries don't occur. They could occur, but the data shows that they are far, far fewer than regular signalized intersections, where those experience higher amounts of higher end rear end accidents and T-bone type accidents, which are more dramatic and typically end up in higher property damage and levels of injuries and fatalities. When we say that they're safe and effective, they are safer, more effective. Crashes can still occur, but they're typically minor property damage type accidents. There was a lot of discussion about bikes and pedestrian access. So bikes, I would concur with Mr. Ryan's discussion that there is a bike lane, or there are bike lanes on both sides of Ruby Lockhart. So if somebody comes out of the site and they want to ride their bike to the town center, they would ride their bike down we'll call it the eastbound direction of Ruby Lockhart to the signal at St. Joseph's. They would cross at the pedestrian crosswalk, and then they would ride their bike up the westbound direction of Ruby Lockhart to get to the town center. There are dedicated bike lanes there. There's a safe pedestrian crossing. And really that, one might look at this and say, well, I'm closer to the town center. I want to go to the town center. But in terms of distance, it's really no difference than if you take Ruby Lockhart and you go east of St. Joseph's, and I'm looking at the aerial imagery on the screen. If you continue east of St. Joseph's, you can see on the north side of Ruby Lockhart, there's under construction, there is a multifamily housing development at that location. To the east of there, there is a townhouse community that was recently completed. Anyone that lives in any one of those areas has to ride their bike a similar distance to what would be required for this project. It's on the other side of the intersection, but it's the same distance bike ride. Similarly, if you go north on St. Joseph's from Ruby Lockhart, the Bulk Hill community that's around the roundabout there, all of those folks who would want to ride their bike are riding a similar distance. They ride south on St. Joseph's, they turn right on Ruby Lockhart up to Woodmore Town Center. And so, it's as the crow flies, this site, somebody might want to get through the woods or a closer route to be able to ride their bikes, but there's not always a way to provide a access in terms of the shortest path that crow flies. Sometimes you might need to ride your bike a little bit further. In this case, an extra 300, 400, 500 feet. And there is safe access and provided bike lanes. As far as pedestrian access, the majority of Woodmore Town Center is within a half mile and a 10-minute walk of this site using the existing sidewalks on the south side of Ruby Lockhart. And so there is adequate pedestrian access to get to and from there. If they're doing a larger shopping trip to the Wegmans or the Costco, they're not likely to walk. They're going to get in their car. they're going to make a right turn out of the site, and they would make a U-turn under the protection of the traffic signal at St. Joseph's to turn back to get to Woodmore Town Center to shop and then return. And so, could there be maybe a little better access in terms of direct bicycle or pedestrian right into the center? There could be, but it's really not feasible in this case due to the environmental, the elevations, and the alternative that we are able to provide is really not out of the ordinary. I mean, it's safe, it's effective, it's really not that far out of the way when you look at the scheme of things. So hopefully that addresses the questions or comments. I
have a question, Mr. Lenhart, for you. Within your realm of expertise as a transportation engineer, did you hear the comments of some of the speakers relative to concerns over safety, being able to pull out of the project, go up to the light at St. Joseph's and Ruby Lockhart, and then be able to make a U-turn before coming in to go down beyond the access and go around the circle at the Best Buy parking lot and then come back up? In your realm of expertise and based upon your studies, do you have an opinion as to whether or not those movements can be made safely?
Yes, absolutely they can. This is a low-speed roadway. It's restricted to a right in and right out. The sight lines are more than adequate for safe ingress, egress. Is there some congestion during peak periods or, morning, midday, evening? Yeah, sure. There's some congestion. This is, this is right outside of the Capitol Beltway. The guidelines and the subdivision ordinance adequacy requirements do allow levels of congestion. And so, it wouldn't be reasonable to think that you're going to come up here and have zero wait and just be able to turn and go. You might have to wait for a gap. You may have to wait for someone to let you in, let you out. But that's very common in these types of situations. Again, low speed, very good sight lines, and not a heavy inbound or outbound movement. It's relatively light.
Thank you very much.
I would also, one other thing I wanted to add, someone asked a question about traffic calming devices or speed humps. The Ruby Lockhart Boulevard is a major collector roadway in the master plan. It is unlikely, the county does have a traffic calming program. They have checklists that they follow to evaluate whether traffic calming devices such as speed humps are warranted. And it's a very quantitative analysis. You go through the checklist and either it meets or it doesn't meet, but then there's many situations on collector or higher roadways where the counties simply would not want speed humps due to emergency response, fire trucks, different things like that could be slowed down or damaged by installation of those devices. So I would doubt that they would allow it, but there is a mechanism where the county can review those requests.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, our other transportation engineer, Maribel Wong of Grove Slade, she has knowledge about whether or not there is a gate at the entrance to St. Joseph's off of St. Joseph's Drive. Would you like to hear that from her?
Yes, please.
Okay. Ms. Wong, could you please introduce yourself and answer the question whether or not the existing left turn into the St. Joseph's parking lot off of northbound St. Joseph's Drive is gated.
This is Maribel Wong for the record. Yes, there is an existing gate at the existing entrance that exists off of St. Joseph's Drive today.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman.
So they open the gate on Sundays, is what you're saying?
Yes, the church controls the access to their parking lot and close it and open as they deem fit. So in theory, yes, the assumption is that they only open it during service.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gibbs.
Thank you, sir. Just a few comments in wrapping up. You know, it's apparent from some of the comments and testimony given that, you know, people just don't want any more apartments because there are some multifamily units that have been built not within Woodmore Town Center, but in other nearby developments. And the only thing I would say to that is that for Woodmore Town Center, 450 to 460 multifamily units have been approved for development since 2005. And so my client is just sort of following up on the approvals that have already been granted for this project. And once again, you know, this particular location, Outlot A, was examined. There's a lengthy planning board resolution approving CSP 03006-02. The district, after the planning board approved it, the district council reviewed it and approved it as well. And, you know, there were, to my knowledge and reading of those resolutions and orders, no issues raised relative to access. You know, we're dealing with a project here that has a long life. Projects this large take this long to develop. You know, I did the Fairwood community. It took us 24 years to get through that. Now we're coming into year 20 of Woodmore Town Center. And that's just the nature of major, large, mixed-use projects of this nature. It takes a long time. You have to deal with recessions. You have to deal with the fact that some of the uses that are approved are there's no market for them at a particular point in time. And then later years come and the market does appear. And so those things have to sort of play themselves out. And that is the reason why major projects like this can develop under a subdivision plan that was approved years previously, because they were tested for the total impact that they would generate on the surrounding roads. And look, I mean, thank goodness that we have a project that is this successful. You know, when you go to successful mixed-use projects and you go to places like Tyson's Corner, you have some congestion because people want to get in there. And to me, I say, you know, my office is directly across off of McCormick Drive. I am in here 3 to 4 to 5 times a week, either at lunchtime or in evening after work hours. And, you know, there are cars, but everything moves and everything moves safely. And quite frankly, by and large, you know, the driving patterns that are observed are such that most people who shop here with regularity, and they're familiar with the traffic patterns. You know, we have an FAR in the MXT zone. Development density is approved by FAR, floor area ratio. The FAR approved for this project is 1.4. Woodmore Town Center, including everything, the entire Woodmore Town Center development, presently exists at an FAR of 0.33 to 0.38. That means they're at 1/4 of the approved FAR for ultimate development of the project. And the trip cap, everything is way beneath the approved trip cap. So I don't want to be disrespectful in any way to concerns of the speakers who have come forward. I respect them and I respect their concerns, but major projects like this carry with it, thankfully, a lot of interest and a lot of attraction to motorists coming to shop. And that's part of success. And I will only say, you know, that since we do meet all of the criteria for an approval, I would respectfully request that the planning board approve this application as it has been presented. And certainly we're willing to entertain any other questions any commissioner may have. But we do believe that we have a legal lot that has been through the platting process. It's been approved for the development that we're proposing. And listen, we have 2 transportation experts. That's it. 2 transportation experts have weighed in, well, 3, and if you include Ms. Wong, but in terms of capacity, in terms of circulation, in terms of safety, we have 2 transportation experts, Mr. Ryan and Mr. Lenhart. They both say that this is okay. This meets the requirements. And so with that being said, again, I would respectfully request that the board approve this detailed site plan as it meets all legal requirements for such an approval. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbs. Hey, folks, I'm sorry to do this, but I need to take a quick break. Commissioners, do we need a slightly extended bio break? Yes? 5 minutes? Okay. All right. We'll take a 5-minute break. We'll come right back. Back from a brief break. Okay, we are back from our break. We have heard rebuttal and close from the applicant. I'll close the public hearing. We are under deliberation. Commissioners, let me just start off by saying, which I said before, we've talked a lot about issues related to potential impacts to offsite facilities like roads and intersections, et cetera. I think we all know it, and I'm glad we had the discussion, but it's actually not what's before us with the detailed site plan. Even though I'm glad we sort of allowed the public forum related to this. So if we can, as we deliberate and as we consider action, if we can restrict this to issues related to the detailed site plan, I think that keeps us on task, okay? So we are under deliberation and thoughts, reactions, commissioners, look for a motion.
Yeah, well, I'll just start, Mr. Chairman, by thanking you for reminding us of that important context and our role and responsibility today. And I think it's also worth thanking Mr. Gibbs and certainly the citizens, because it was a good discussion. I think it was a really good discussion, albeit out of scope. Clearly, hearts and minds needed to be clearer and just hear some things. So I just want to be on the record as saying thank you. And also, I can't remember, I believe it was the first councilwoman or council person that spoke, talked about not being involved or engaged earlier in the process. And perhaps someone, Mr. Hunt, you or someone on our team can make sure that because what I was hearing was not necessarily just involved in like the DSPs or preliminary plans, but much earlier in the planning development process as it relates to what's going to happen in a community, because that's where I really, at least in my mind, that's where I heard that there was a need to or desire to be engaged. So if we could connect with the community in that regard, I think that would also be beneficial.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other commissioners? Questions, comments, thoughts? If not, then I would look for a motion.
Just one quick comment. I'm sorry, excuse me.
Yeah.
I couldn't get my mic on, but I just thank you for your comment about the making sure that we remember why we're here, and on this, particularly on this particular case, and staying focused. I did make a comment that had very little to do with the case about my ability to navigate roundabouts, and so That had nothing to do with the case. It had more to do with my ability to effectively and efficiently navigate a roundabout no matter where it is. So I want to make sure that everybody understands that I realize that this is not a part of the case, but something that I wanted to express at that particular time. And thank you, Mr. Chair.
And also about your relationship with God, which was helpful to hear.
Absolutely, because I do pray when I do those roundabouts, no matter where they are.
Commissioner Giraldo, anything from your side?
Well, I just want to thank the citizens for coming and hope they understand that we appreciate all of their comments. You know, but at this stage of the proceeding, those issues that they've raised should have been raised or would have been raised previously. It's not an issue now. And I understand because I go there from time to time, and I know the traffic circle, Commissioner or Vice Chair Bailey, what usually happens is not so much you, but there's people that really don't know how to navigate roundabouts. Because I have the same problem on Oxon Hill Road.
Yeah.
And by the new school in Fort Washington, which has always been of a concern to me with the students there, because people don't know how to navigate and they don't understand that you have to yield to the person who's first in the circle. And so, but I sympathize with that issue. I also thank Mr. Gibbs and the developers and the applicants for the dog park and for making the proffer to add the EV charging. I think that's something that our county needs to work on more. There's already an existing shortage of charging stations for EVs, and the situation is only going to be get worse before better. But other than that, I just thank everybody and for their participation, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I appreciate all the thoughtful remarks. And commissioners, if there's no further deliberation, I would look for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make the motion, and I'll just have one final comment, and that is to Mr. Linhart. And I believe I'm quoting him correctly when he said, "The way the crow flies." I was not familiar with that term, but every time I see him henceforth, I will think about that phrase. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt the findings of staff to include the technical corrections as read into the record by staff and approve DSP-22034, DDS-22002, AC-23001, and TCP2-053-07-06, along with the conditions as outlined in staff's report and is further modified by applicant exhibit number 1. And also want to ensure that we incorporate 2 proffered conditions by the applicant as they were read into the record. The first has to do with dog parks shall be constructed at the time or point of first occupancy. And the second will be to show the number of EV charging stations at the time of certification. And I would ask staff and council to ensure that the language is included in the resolution appropriately.
Second.
Got a motion by Commissioner Washington, a second by Commissioner Giraldo. Any discussion on the motion? No discussion. I will call the roll. Commissioner Washington?
Vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo?
I vote aye.
Vice Chair Bailey?
Vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 4-0. Thanks to everyone from the public, the City of Glenarden, council members, Mr. Gibbs and your team, and Mr. Shelley. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, members of the planning board, Mr. Chairman, members, and have a nice day.
Thank you. We'll now move on to item 7 on our agenda. This is a specific design plan, SDP 2202 National Capital Business Park, parcels 1, 2, and 10. We have Mr. Antonetti representing the applicant. We have Ms. Lockhart who will give the staff presentation. This is an evidentiary hearing, so I'll require those who are intending to provide testimony to take an oath, separate from Mr. Antonetti and Ms. Lockhart. Mr. Antonetti, are there members? There's no one else signed up from the public to speak on this, but Mr. Antonetti, are you expecting that we're going to be needing to swear in members of your team?
Mr. Chair, I'm not anticipating calling anybody, but in that eventuality, if we could swear them in at that time, that would probably be the most appropriate one.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Antonetti. Ms. Lockhart, I will turn it to you for the staff presentation.
Great, thank you. Doing a sound check. Can you all hear me all right?
We can hear you fine, thank you.
Thank you. All right, good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the board. For the record, I am Dominique Lockhart with the zoning section. Item number 7 on the agenda is Specific Design Plan SDP-2202 titled National Capital Business Park for parcels 1, 2, and 10, which proposes development of 2 warehouse distribution buildings. There is also an associated alternative compliance as well as a type 2 tree conservation plan. As a matter of housekeeping, staff would like to note 2 technical corrections to the staff report. On page 4, the total gross and net acreage will be revised to state 27.87 acres. In addition, a revised referral has been received from the special project section with some minor technical corrections, which will be added to the referral summary on page 24. The applicant has submitted 2 exhibits containing revised conditions and a revised alternative compliance site plan, which are contained in your additional backup. Staff is in agreement with the revised conditions. If text support could go to slide 13, please. Thank you. Regarding the alternative compliance, section 4.3-2 of the 2010 landscape manual requires a minimum of 10% interior planting for parking lot 1 and 8% for parking lot 2. The applicant has requested 6.6% for parking lot 1 and 6.9% for parking lot 2. Staff has recommended disapproval of the submitted AC or alternative compliance, as there are modifications that would allow the applicant to meet both the interior planting and parking requirements. The proposed alternative compliance as submitted fails to be equally effective as normal compliance in terms of the ability to fulfill the design criteria required for parking lots. A condition has been included requiring the applicant to conform to section 4.3 prior to the certification of the SDP. The applicant has provided a revised condition that states the applicant will conform to section 4.3 or receive an approved AC prior to certification of the SDP. Staff is in full agreement with the condition as revised. The next step would be for the applicant to provide a revised landscape plan demonstrating conformance or provide a revised AC application to be further reviewed by staff. In conclusion, based on the findings presented in the technical staff report, staff recommends that the planning board approve specific design plan SDP-2202, associated type 2 tree conservation plan TCP2-026-2021-08, and disapprove alternative compliance AC-22004, subject to the conditions as revised and the technical corrections as noted. This concludes staff's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lockhart. Commissioners, are we clear with what Ms. Lockhart has said, that this is conditioned upon the appropriate approval by staff? If we were to support this? Okay. All right. Yes. Mr. Antonetti, turn over to you.
Sorry. Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the, good afternoon, excuse me, Mr. Chair, members of the Planning Board. For the record, my name is Robert Antonetti with the law firm of Shipley and Horn. Today with me, I have my partner, Mr. Arthur Horn, and our senior land planner, Mr. John Ferrante. We are pleased to represent the applicant in this case for SDP 2202 and the companion alternative compliance. Today with me, we also have Mr. Cole Schnorr and Mr. Zach Alter, representative of the applicant, Mr. Chris Rizzi and Haley Carpenter from Bowler Engineering, Mr. Mike Lenhart, our traffic engineer, Ms. Aubrey Freely, and Mr. Kyle Thibault from Arco Design Build. Who will be handling and overseeing the construction and development of these 2 buildings. I'd like to acknowledge Ms. Lockhart for her thorough and professional review of this application. It's my first opportunity actually to work with her on a case, and I'm very impressed. I look forward to working with her again in the future. The board is reviewing the 6th SDP for the National Capital Business Park. This is the 5th one for a building. As you're aware, the National Capital Business Park is a new and modern logistics park located adjacent to the existing Collington Center. The master plan for the site includes this area as part of the future Collington employment area. The project will bring significant job growth and commercial tax-based growth to the county. The two buildings in this proposal are two warehouse logistics buildings. On parcel 1 and 2, there's a building that equals 311,000 square feet. Parcel 10 is 184,000 square feet approximately for both. The total development is 495,180 square feet. We do agree with the findings of the staff. With regards to the alternative compliance, we did meet with staff to talk about the opportunity really to find some opportunities for greater interior landscape area within parking lot 1 and the treatment of parking lot 2 for the first building. The exhibit, which is shown in your backup, does reflect our attempt to increase the area of internal green space. We're actually proposing an increase of approximately 2,248 square feet. Again, this I think is sheet 3 of the additional backup, which is posted online and should be with your backup materials. This will raise the for lot 1 the interior landscape area, internal landscape area to about 8.9%, which the compliance requires 10%. We all are also planting additional shade trees. Excuse me. Instead of 31 required, 41 are being proposed total around the perimeter of the parking lot, which are areas that aren't counted as part of the green space landscape manual requirements, but they are approximate to the parking lot. So that's part of our alternative. I mentioned this just to state that we are working very hard and diligently to propose an alternative that meets the approval of the staff, and through this revised condition, which the staff agrees to, hopefully the planning director as designee of the planning board as part of the future alternative compliance submission as indicated is necessary by Ms. Lockhart. So with that, we do otherwise support the staff's recommended findings and conditions of approval as modified by the staff's recommended exhibit, condition change exhibit in your backup material. Our team is here to answer any questions that you may have. We thank you for your consideration, and I will yield back to the chair for any questions or comments for the team.
Thank you, Mr. Finetti. Commissioners, any questions for the applicant? Seeing none, there's no one signed up to speak on this. I will close the public hearing. We are under deliberation. What's before us is staff's recommendation. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt the findings of staff to include the technical corrections as read into the record by staff and approve SDP-2202, TCP2-026-2021-08, and disapprove AC-22004, subject to the conditions as outlined in staff's report and is further modified by applicant exhibit number 1.
Second.
We've got a motion by Commissioner Washington, second by Commissioner Giraldo. Just under discussion, I just want to check in with staff whether Commissioner Washington always does an able job reading these motions. But given the last minute moves around this alternative compliance issue, is this meeting, are we aligned with you staff around what this motion is?
Yes, you are. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the roll. Commissioner Washington.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo.
I vote aye.
Vice Chair Bailey.
Vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 4-0. Thank you, Mr. Antonetti. Thank you, Ms. Lockhart. We have one final item, and we may lose Vice Chair Bailey. She's under a bit of a time crunch. If she drops off, we still have our 3 votes. We still have a quorum. Item Item 8 on our agenda, Community Planning Division. This is City of Mount Rainier Legacy Mixed Use Town Center Design Review Committee nominations. Mr. Klein.
Yes, can you hear me all right, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, we can.
Good morning, or good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the Planning Board. This is Connor Klein for the record with the Community Planning Division, presenting the City of Mount Rainier's nominations for the Legacy Mixed Use Town Center Design Review Committee. Mr. Chairman, would you like me to read the memo into the record or just the list of nominees?
Just the list of nominees, please.
The nominees are as follows: Robin Bliss, Alina Brav, Nathan Birch, Nathan Cederoth, Sachin Kandari, Samantha Kay, and Anthony Lee.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Klein. Anything else you have for us, Mr. Klein?
Nothing for you at this time, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
All right, Commissioners, any questions about these nominations?
And the length of this term is 2 years?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Okay.
All right, if there's no further questions on this, I would look for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we accept the recommendation of staff and confirm the nomination for the individuals as read into the record by staff for the new Mount Rainier, not the new, but the Mount Rainier LMUTC Design Review Committee.
Second.
We've got a motion by Commissioner Watson, second by Vice Chair Bailey. Under discussion, Mr. Klein, are any of the nominees online with us right now?
I do not believe so, no.
Okay, I just want to give them a wave just in case. We've got a motion, a second. If there's no further discussion, I'll call the roll. Commissioner Washington.
Vote aye.
Vice Chair Bailey.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo.
Vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 4-0. Thank you, Mr. Klein. Mr. Hunt, any further business before us?
Mr. Chairman, there are no additional business items before the board today.
Thank you. All right, without objection, folks, on this very hot day, we are adjourned. Thank you all.
Have a good one, everyone. Bye.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.